Marvel's master of multiversal magic. Welcome back, brave explorers of impossible worlds. We are excited to have you here to continue this odyssey together. Before we continue, everything you'll hear is pure fiction, so please don't try to replicate combat techniques at home. This wonderful story and all its rights belong to its brilliant original author. We are only the messengers of entertainment. Want another dose of adventure? Subscribe to our YouTube channel so you don't miss a single chapter, and if you can't wait, our Patreon has exclusive surprises you'll love. Chapter 776 Royal Conspiracy. Keeping you around is pointless. After reading the mysterious man's memories, George slapped him to death and then took a Sequence 5 extraordinary trade. The Twilight Hermit's meetings are all held in dreams, with Adam personally pulling people in. Even if he had puppeted Lockhart Sickayam and obtained all of Lockhart Sickayam's memories, making sure he didn't reveal any flaws, it would only be useful in offline gatherings, not in dreams. Because the puppeted Lockhart Sickayam was actually dead, he couldn't be pulled into the dream to attend the meeting. Keep him, maybe you can still lure other members. After dealing with Lockhart Sickayam, George returned home and continued to remotely control Jason. Adam, having discovered Lockhart's death, had a certain chance of sending a more powerful expert to investigate. That would inevitably lead to Jason, whom they had hired, which would be perfect for him to wait for. So he planned to keep Jason as a puppet, letting him live as usual. He was still somewhat interested in Adam, the divine incarnation of the ancient sun god. Why did Adam kill Duke Negan? What was the significance of letting the tides of history develop in a predetermined direction? Could it be related to the ascension ritual of the audience sequence? As a Sequence 1 angel, Adam currently had two main tasks. One was to merge with a true creator and become the complete ancient sun god. The other was to advance to Sequence 0 and become a true god. He currently possessed the sealed artifact 0-08, which was equivalent to holding the extraordinary characteristics of Sequence 1. If Adam wanted to advance to true god, he would definitely have to seize the 0-08 sealed artifact from him in the future, so if possible, he would definitely strike first. I have a feeling that Adam has some connection with the Rune royal family. Although Lockhart's memories did not contain any connection with the Rune royal family, the task of killing Duke Negan was helping the Rune royal family remove obstacles. In addition, the Rune royal family was secretly collecting a large number of slaves through human trafficking. Let's see what the church's investigation is like tomorrow. The next day, Crystal took the initiative to find George through a dream. George, we need your help. Do you want me to help you take down that celt? George looked interested. Creste shook his head somewhat awkwardly. No, we hope you can patrol Backland more often recently. If you find anything unusual, notify us immediately. It seems the royal family has given you a reasonable explanation. George raised an eyebrow upon hearing this. Creste sighed. Last night, our Archbishop and the Archbishop of the Storm Church went to the royal family to question them about human trafficking. The royal family did not deny it. Their explanation was that they had discovered the ruins of the Blood Emperor Aristotutor and wanted to excavate them secretly, which is why they bought so many slaves. As for human trafficking and the capture, imprisonment, and training of young girls, those were the private actions of a few military extraordinary individuals, and the royal family was unaware of them. The Blood Emperor Aristotutor, George recalled the information he had obtained about the Blood Emperor from Roselle's notes, the memories of those extraordinary individuals from soul-searching and fleecing the evil god. Aristotle appeared in the 3rd century, witnessing the second profane tablet with the angels, thus gaining control of the Black Emperor's sequence pathway. During the reign of Solomon in the 4th century, he ascended to Black Emperor Sequence 2, and after the fall of Black Emperor Solomon, he advanced to Sequence 1. However, because Black Emperor Solomon was about to be resurrected, Trensis, with the support of the 6 gods, switched pathways to become the judge, establishing the Trensis Empire and becoming the Night Emperor. He was forced, with the support of Ammon and others, to forcibly advance to the non-adjacent Red Priest pathway, becoming a half-made true god and establishing the Tuldur Empire. Under his command were the 5 archangel families, Ammon, Bethel Abraham, Antigonus, Jacob, and Tamara. He also received the support of the illusory angel Adam. Finally, he perished during the War of the 4 Emperors. You believed their story. We went to see the ruins, and they are indeed the ruins of Blood Emperor Aristotutor. The slaves they bought are also there. The royal family promised that once the excavation of the ruins is completed, they will be freed and allowed to live in Backland. Everything seems flawless. Those extraordinary individuals from MI9 were executed on the spot, and Saint Selt was dismissed from all his posts for lax management. Crest paused, then slowly said, however, the Archbishop still feels that things are not so simple, so he hopes you can take some time to patrol Backlund. If you can discover anything unusual and find the royal family's true hidden secret, the Archbishop said he can use the potion ingredients of a Sequence 4 trickster as a reward. Investigating the royal family's hidden secrets is too dangerous for low sequence night watchers, while high sequence ones are too busy. After all, the church's true enemies are those evil gods and cultists. Therefore, the most suitable person to investigate this matter is George. George is not affiliated with the church, is powerful enough, and has a lot of free time. If he can find out something, great. If he can't, there's no loss. No problem, George agreed without hesitation. He often patrolled at night looking for cultists anyway, so it was just a side job. He also felt that while the royal family's explanation was perfect, it had a hint of trying to cover something up. The royal family discovered the Blood Emperor's ruins, and Adam helped them eliminate the Conservative Party leader. Adam had once been a supporter of the Blood Emperor. Recalling the Black Emperor's ascension ritual and the Black Emperor card he had previously acquired, George suddenly had some guesses. Would someone in the royal family be planning to ascend to the Black Emperor level? Adam had once been a supporter of the Blood Emperor. If he allied with a Rune royal family, helping them find the Blood Emperor's ruins would make sense. And Adam possessed the second profane tablet, knowing all the knowledge of the Black Emperor sequence. Coincidentally, the adjacent pathway to the Judge's pathway, which the royal family controlled, was the Black Emperor pathway. The Black Emperor's ascension ritual required the construction of 9 tombs, and building tombs naturally required manpower. To conceal this from the church, the royal family couldn't openly mobilize the populace, so they could only acquire a large number of slaves by controlling human traffickers. If that's really the case, then is George III the one who wants to become a god? To advance to become the Black Emperor of Sequence 0, one's identity must first be that of an emperor. The current king of the Kingdom of Rune is named George III. Moreover, one of the requirements of the advancement ceremony is that, as emperor, one must establish a set of strict and complex rules that defy normal circumstances. This also aligns with the royal family's behavior of not supporting the Conservative Party, but instead supporting the new party and constantly implementing various reforms. Chapter 777 The Impending Disaster. No wonder they didn't dare let the church know. George became even more certain of his guess. Christian had mentioned to him that the 7 major churches had a unified rule. The kings of all nations in this world could be extraordinary beings, but absolutely could not exceed Sequence 5. If their sequence level exceeded Sequence 5, they had to abdicate in favor of the next king. The church's reasoning was that once someone surpassed Sequence 5 and became a demigod, they were no longer human and possessed a lifespan beyond that of normal humans. A typical demigod's lifespan was around 300 years, and those with special sequence pathways could live even longer. This would make the people suspicious, as they would discover their king didn't age. Most ordinary people, while believing in gods, were unaware of the existence of extraordinary beings. However, this was merely the church's explanation. George felt it was a secondary reason. The main reason was to maintain a balance of power within the royal family. If a king remained on the throne for too long, he might develop other ambitions and become difficult to control. Therefore, if George III wanted to advance through a different path to become the Black Emperor, he had to break the church's rules, surpass Sequence 5, and advance to Sequence 1 of the Judgment sequence. This, of course, had to be done secretly, without the church's knowledge. But thinking about it, it makes sense. Any ruler with ambition wouldn't want to be constantly suppressed by the church. Once he ascends to the Black Emperor level, he'll be on par with the 7 great gods, and the church will be powerless against him. The situation will then return to what it was like in the 4th century. The emperor will be the supreme ruler of this world, and the church will obey his commands. If that's the case, then I'm sorry, George had initially held a sliver of goodwill towards this king who sounded the same as him, thinking him a good king dedicated to reform for the people. But now it seemed completely different. He was just a tyrant with no bottom line, pursuing his own power and interests. Whether it was reform policies or human trafficking, it was all to advance himself to Sequence 0 Black Emperor. Of course, this had nothing to do with him. After all, what the other party did didn't infringe on his interests, and he had no hatred towards him. So, normally, unless there was a huge benefit, He wouldn't sabotage the other party's Godhood plan. But there was no other way. Bernadette offered him the magic lamp as payment to help rescue Rosal. And Rosal was also a Sequence Zero Black Emperor. A sequence can only have one true god. If he rescues Rosal, it means all of George II's preparations have been in vain. He prepared so much, for so long, at such a great cost, only to find he has no chance of advancing. George II would probably be furious upon learning the truth. Or rather, according to the normal course of events, George III would advance from Sequence 1 of the Judgment Sequence to the Black Emperor Sequence via a transfer route. The moment he prepares the ritual and takes the potion, he would die instantly because there's no possibility of advancement. It's quite interesting to think about. I must go and see then, maybe I can even recover a piece of the extraordinary characteristics of Judgment Sequence 1. George's lips curled slightly. As for whether George II can advance before Rosal's return, that's naturally impossible. Firstly, even if Bernadette can't find the nameless island in time, she'll convert a locator magic within a few days. Secondly, judging from the current situation, George II's ritual preparations are clearly insufficient. Duke Negan has just died, and although many reform plans have made progress, they still need time. Even if George II ascended prematurely without a fully completed ritual, it wouldn't matter. He could simply disguise himself as any random passerby and vandalize any of George II's 9 tombs to interrupt the ascension ceremony. Meanwhile, George II was secretly meeting with Adam in a dream. The 3 major churches have discovered something. Although I used your imagined Blood Emperor ruins to cover it up, it's unlikely to remain a secret for long. When he was still a prince, he had unexpectedly joined the ancient and powerful Twilight Hermits. Of course, he now knew it wasn't an accident. Adam had deliberately brought him in. But it didn't matter, it was a win-win situation. Adam recruited him to complete his own ascension ceremony, and with the help of the Twilight Hermits, he successfully eliminated the other princes and ascended the throne. Later, thanks to the Judgment Sequence potion recipe given to him by Adam, he secretly advanced to Sequence 1, the Hand of Order, gaining the possibility of a pathway to Sequence 0, the Black Emperor. Knowing he had the potential to become the Black Emperor, his family ancestors, who had previously dared not defy the church, changed their attitude and were willing to protect him with all their might. According to the plan, the ceremony would be completed in a few months, allowing him to secretly advance. However, the church unexpectedly discovered his human trafficking activities ahead of schedule and became suspicious. How could it be so early? Adam frowned upon hearing this. Duke Negan has already been dealt with. You need to complete the ceremony as soon as possible. I sense some unexpected crisis. If we continue according to the plan, things might not go so smoothly. Although, due to the impending disappearance of the barrier and the pressure from the outer gods, even if the 7 gods knew the truth, they would likely not prevent George II from becoming the Black Emperor. But anything can happen unexpectedly. Moreover, his spiritual intuition had also foreseen something. It seems I need to get the witch cult tracked ahead of schedule. Hearing Adam's warning, George II had already made his decision. He had already secretly reached a cooperation agreement with the witch cult using the extraordinary characteristics of a Red Priest Sequence 1 Conqueror. Now that Duke Negan was dead, the church had also become suspicious. Then let the witch church create a catastrophic event in Backland that could wipe out tens of thousands of civilians. This way, we can accelerate the passage of reform policies, attract the church's attention, and cover up the number of missing persons and the secret of the mausoleum construction. As for the tens of thousands of civilians who died, they should feel honored to have sacrificed their lives for their king's ascension to godhood. Yes, the goddess of darkness shouldn't have the energy to stop it right now. Adam nodded, agreeing with George II's idea. As far as he knew, the goddess of night should be focusing all her energy on ensuring the uniqueness of the death path and wouldn't be able to stop the disaster created by the witch church. As for the Lord of Storms, that guy's main focus was at sea and he wouldn't easily intervene. Moreover, he knew that George II was not only cooperating with the witch church but also with the Aurora Society. However, he hadn't told him because of George II's attitude towards the true creator. Chapter 778 Tell Your Story. On Wednesday afternoon at 3 p.m., the tarot meeting proceeded as usual. The blurry figures of Justice, the Hanged Man, and the Sun appeared one by one. This time, Hugh and Furs, who had drawn the Judgment and the Magician cards respectively, were also present. After greetings, new and old members introduced themselves. followed by the offering of Roselle's journal and the reading of the Fool's Journal. Afterwards, there was free discussion and trading. I currently have one extraordinary trait from the Hangman sequence, Sequence 5, Shepherd, one extraordinary trait from the Black Emperor sequence, Sequence 6, Corrupted Baron, two extraordinary traits from the Abyss Path, Sequence 6, Demon, one extraordinary trait from the Gate Path, Sequence 6, Recorder, one extraordinary trait from the Witch Path, Sequence 5, Witch of Pain, one extraordinary trait from the Storm Path, Sequence 6, Wind Chosen, one extraordinary trait from the Dark Path, Sequence 6, Soul Soother, one extraordinary trait from the Moon Path, Sequence 6, Potions Professor, one extraordinary trait from the Inquisitor Path, Sequence 8, Sheriff, Sequence 7, Inquisitor, Sequence 6, Judge, and Sequence 5, Punisher. I also have potion recipes from Sequence 5 onwards. Anyone who needs them can come and exchange them. George spoke first. These were all his spoils from killing Mr. A and those MI9 extraordinaries this week. Hiss. Hearing George's words, everyone gasped, including Klein, who was sitting above disguised as the fool. George was talking about extraordinary traits, not extraordinary materials. Extraordinary traits are mostly extracted by killing extraordinary individuals of the corresponding sequence. So how many people did George kill in just 1 week? However, considering George's constant search for cultists and his good relationship with the Church of the Goddess of Night and the Church of the Lord of Storms, they breathed a slight sigh of relief. These extraordinary traits were likely obtained by Mr. George and the Church from hunting down cultists. Hugh and Furs, newcomers to the Tarot Society, were almost speechless with shock. They hadn't expected the members of the Tarot Society to be so terrifying. Trading so many extraordinary traits and potion recipes so casually, it felt like extraordinary traits were free. They knew that finding suitable potion recipes and ingredients at the Backland Trade Fair was a rare treat. I want the extraordinary trait of the Sequence 7 psychologist from last time. I can pay cash directly. Audrey was the first to raise her hand. She had almost fully digested the potion and could prepare for advancing to Sequence 7. I want the extraordinary trait of a Sequence 5 when chosen one. I don't have enough money right now, so I'll pay you in 3 days. Alger was the second to raise his hand. What? You can pay in advance. Hugh and Furs exchanged bewildered glances. They had never heard of trading extraordinary traits on credit. Audrey, standing nearby, recognized the two newcomers as Hugh and Furs, whom she had recommended to join the organization. She didn't reveal her identity but enthusiastically explained to them, Mr. Power is the most powerful high-sequence expert in our Tarot Society. He allows us to buy on credit, and we can even borrow money from him without interest. We can pay him back slowly when we become stronger. Such a good thing. Mr. Power is so kind. Hugh and Furs' eyes lit up. The fear of joining the mysterious organization had vanished, replaced by regret for not joining sooner. I want a weapon that suits me and can enhance my combat abilities. Sun raised his hand. He had already obtained a Sequence 7 potion recipe from George at the last tarot meeting, and the corresponding potion materials were available in Silver City. So now he just needed a suitable weapon to boost his combat power. How about this sword? George immediately used transfiguration to conjure a great sword and then casually inscribed some Taoist runes on it. When using it, input spiritual energy, chant summon lightning to unleash lightning, summon fire god to spray flames, summon wind to manipulate air currents, and summon water dragon to unleash a water surge. Perfect. I'll trade it with the materials I have collected. Sun's eyes lit up. A weapon capable of unleashing a continuous energy attack. This was exactly what he wanted. By the way, if you have combat needs, you can also have some similar weapons custom made from me, George casually remarked, looking at the others who also yearned for the great sword. Forging such a low-level magical item would only take him a few seconds. It was a piece of cake. Mr. Power, you're so generous. The crowd immediately praised George loudly, secretly marveling. We didn't expect Mr. Power to be able to forge magical items. In their understanding, only those on the perfect path, the extraordinary ones, those from the Church of Steam and Machinery, were skilled at forging magical items. Of course, they assumed the sword George had produced was preforged, unaware that George himself had forged it on the spot. Otherwise, they would have been even more shocked. Mr. Power, I want the extraordinary trait of a Sequence 8 sheriff, but I don't have enough money. Could I pay you back? At this moment, Hugh also bravely raised her hand. She had used the money Miss Audrey had given her to exchange for the potion formula for a Sequence 8 sheriff. Now, she didn't have enough to buy the sheriff's extraordinary trait. No need to be so polite. This isn't our first meeting. George took out the sheriff's extraordinary trait and tossed it to Hugh. Hugh took the sheriff's extraordinary trait, her face full of doubt. Mr. Power, have we met before? 4 days ago, when I went to capture Mr. A, I saw you and Miss Magician at the trade fair, George said with a smile, not minding revealing his identity in reality. It's you, Hugh and Furs exclaimed simultaneously. How could they not remember what happened 4 days ago? That was the first time they had witnessed a battle between high-sequence powerhouses. You are that, baby, that's right, that's one of my real-life personas, George smiled. One of my personas, the other's heart skipped a beat upon hearing this. Sure enough, Mr. Power's true identity was definitely not just a baby. That baby might just be Mr. Power's disguised identity. Mr. Power, I want to ask you for a favor. As for the reward, I will try my best to pay you back slowly. At this moment, Furs also spoke up. When she was pulled into this place by Mr. Fool during her Red Moon musings, Mr. Fool told her that there was someone among the Tarot Club members who could help her solve her problem. Now it seems that it must be this terrifyingly powerful Mr. Power. Tell me your story. George knew that the real business had arrived when he heard Furs's request. All the previous matters were trivial to him. What he really cared about at this Tarot Club was Furs. Because he could connect with Mr. the Door through Furs. Chapter 779 Mr. Door Contaminated. I accidentally acquired a mysterious bracelet that grants me limited ability to travel between spirit realms. However, ever since I started using it, I hear muttering voices every full moon, which nearly drives me out of control, especially during a blood moon. Furs recounted her situation with slight modifications. Aside from concealing her identity and how she acquired the bracelet, she didn't lie. So you want me to help you resolve the full moon muttering? George asked with a smile. Furs nodded quickly. I can give you anything you need, and if I don't have it, I'll figure something out. If she didn't resolve this soon, she would eventually become a monster due to the uncontrollable mutterings, and she felt the day was fast approaching. George smiled. With spirit realm travel, I roughly know the reason for the full moon mutterings. You know, Furs immediately sat up straight. Curiosity also appeared in the eyes of the others. Your bracelet must have been imbued with some extraordinary properties of the Gate Path, and the Archangel King of the Gate Path is named Bethel Abraham. This Archangel King, who is close to true God, was banished to the moon during the era of the 4 emperors and has been trying to return to this world ever since. That babbling voice should have been caused by him, George speculated based on the contents of Roselle's notes. It's not a big problem, I'll help you solve it. As for the reward, I'll get it from Bethel Abraham while I solve the problem for you. Come to this address at midnight tonight. He gave Furs's home address. Furs's face lit up with surprise upon hearing this. She hadn't expected that the problem that had troubled her for so long would be so easy for Mr. Power. Audrey, Alger, and the others, on the other hand, had their understanding of Mr. Power's strength refreshed once again. They had thought that Mr. Power was probably Sequence 4, or at most Sequence 3, but they hadn't expected that he could communicate with the legendary Archangel King to solve a problem. Mainly, judging from Mr. Power's tone, he didn't seem to take the Archangel King particularly seriously. Could it be that Mr. Power was a Sequence 2 or even a Sequence 1 angel? By the way, you guys continue to help me find clues about cultists, preferably demigods or higher, or some history from the 4th era would also be helpful. Finally, George emphasized his task again, mainly to the newly joined Hugh and Furs. These two often attended trade fairs for wild extraordinary individuals, and had a high chance of encountering powerful cultists. Like the Mr. A from last time, Audrey's intelligence mainly came from these two. In his opinion, if the Aurora Society had any conspiracy in background, and Mr. A was dead, they would definitely send Mr. BCD to take his place. Given their style, they might still be posing as wild extraordinary individuals, organizing trade fairs to hide their identities and gather intelligence. After the tarot meeting ended, George stayed behind to chat with Klein for a while. Klein had already advanced to Sequence 7 magician, and Leonard, the night watcher who might be possessed by an angel, had also advanced to Sequence 7 nightmare. In another month, the two would be transferred to the Backlunge district. Meanwhile, Dunn, the night watcher's captain, had successfully advanced to Sequence 6 Soul Soother after acquiring the acting technique. However, he didn't choose to transfer to Backland, but instead remained in Tingen. At midnight, George sensed Furs coming downstairs and teleported there in a flash of light. "Good evening, Miss Magician." "Good evening, Mr. Power." Furs, wearing a beige high-necked long dress and with long, slightly wavy brown hair, bowed respectfully to George, who suddenly appeared floating in the air. She dared not show the slightest disrespect to Mr. Power, an angel-level being. "No need to be so polite, I'm very easygoing." George, along with Furs, transformed into a ball of fire and arrived in the suburbs far from Backland. Communication might be a bit noisy later, it's inconvenient in the city. The city is full of experts from the 3 major churches, and if a conflict were to occur with Mr. Door, there would inevitably be huge energy fluctuations. Furs quickly nodded and handed George a bracelet with blue stones in her hand. George took the bracelet and, based on the extraordinary characteristics of the bracelet and the marks hidden in the spiritual energy within Furs's body, began to divine the source. Closing his eyes, a middle-aged man with a stern face and a few strands of white hair appeared in his perception. The man had clearly noticed George's divination. He calmly focused his gaze and greeted him gently. "Hello, friend, Bethel Abraham." George raised an eyebrow and inquired. His powerful spiritual senses had already detected that the man's calmness and gentleness were a facade, concealing madness and distortion. "You know me? I actually prefer to be called Mr. Men." The man's attitude remained gentle. "I am trapped in endless darkness. If you are willing to save me, I promise to grant you 3 wishes." "How can I save you?" George didn't immediately expose him but asked with a smile. Mr. Men quickly explained a complex ritual. "If you follow my ritual, I can escape the darkness and return to the world." "No problem," George nodded. Mr. Men was clearly taken aback by George's quick agreement. He had never expected George to agree to save him. His purpose in doing this was merely to use the pretext of returning to corrupt his target later, just like how he corrupted Emperor Roselle back then. However, the conditions need to be changed. "I don't need you to fulfill my 3 wishes, George grinned. "I want the uniqueness of the Door path within you and the extraordinary characteristics of those 3 Sequence 1 star keys. The Door path, the Diviner path, and the Error path are adjacent paths that can be converted or absorbed and merged. If he advances to Sequence 0 of the Diviner path, then the next step is to devour the uniqueness and Sequence 1 characteristics of the other 2 paths. According to the information gleaned from the true creator, the uniqueness of the Error path is Amen, whose current whereabouts are unknown. He will have to wait until he transforms his search magic, converts more spiritual energy, and advances to a higher sequence before tracking him down. The uniqueness of the Door path lies with this Mr. Door. It seems you have a big appetite." After realizing what was happening, Mr. Door hesitated for a moment before nodding seriously. "Okay, as long as you can save me, I am willing to hand over the unique characteristics of the 3 Sequence 1 star keys of the doorway." Chapter 780 The First Clash with the Fallen Mother Goddess. George knew perfectly well that Mr. Door's promises were unreliable. But he didn't care, because by the time he decided to save Mr. Door, he would already be Sequence 0 of the Diviner sequence. He could just forcibly take it then. "Very well, let me collect some interest first." George activated the divination effect to its fullest extent, just like he had previously exploited the true creator, and began to extract all information about the Door path from Mr. Door. Mr. Door did not stop him, but instead revealed a sinister smile. Because at this moment, a wisp of crimson power had begun to invade George's mind along the direction of the divination. Trying to corrupt my mind, how could George not notice the invading crimson wisp? But he did not immediately expel that power, but continued to exploit Mr. Door. Only after he had extracted all the knowledge of the Door path did he disconnect from Mr. Door and switch to divination regarding that crimson power. Divining the source of this power that wants to corrupt me, a colossal creature with huge wings, seemingly formed from stacked reproductive organs, appeared in George's eyes. The fallen mother goddess, the origin of evil, the immortal one, the ruler of the real world, the path of the world, the path of the primordial chaos. A flood of mysterious knowledge and information began to pour into George's mind. "I am your mother, become my loyal child." The other party clearly noticed George's exploitative behavior and immediately intensified its contamination of him through divination. This is the power of an outer god. It feels far stronger than the true creator and the eternal sun. George dared not be careless about the direct contamination from the fallen mother goddess. Although separated by the barrier left by the original creator, and only through divination clues for reverse contamination, the fallen mother goddess residing outside Earth was clearly far more powerful than the true gods of Earth. Even he, if careless, could potentially suffer hidden dangers in his mind. Merge, George muttered to himself in a rare display of youthful exuberance. Then, his main body and the souls of his various world avatars were simultaneously transmitted, merging into one. A powerful mental barrier enveloped him, completely isolating him from the contamination transmitted by the fallen mother goddess. Seeing that she couldn't corrupt George, the fallen mother had no choice but to sever the connection to prevent him from stealing more information. So Rosal was also corrupted by this guy, which is why he can't return, George murmured to himself as he reopened his eyes. Although the fallen mother had severed the divination connection, he had still gained considerable information. This fallen mother was no ordinary being. She was the first child to split off from the first creator, and then mated with the first creator, giving birth to most of the outer gods in the universe. During the first era, due to the first creator's awakening, her essence and two pathways were forcibly taken away. The stolen essence was called the Mother Nest, and the two extraordinary traits were Mother and Moon. To reclaim her own essence and extraordinary traits, she corrupted the progenitor of the vampires in the second era, and Mr. Door in the fourth era. Then, in the fifth era, she corrupted Rosal again by having Mr. Door trick him into going to the moon. It was precisely because of the corruption of the fallen mother's nest that Rosal hesitated to return, fearing he would become a puppet of the fallen mother and bring disaster to Earth. Expel him, using the powerful soul force after their fusion, George completely erased the mark Mr. Gate had left on Furz's extraordinary characteristic. If Furz were merely an extraordinary being of the Gate pathway, she wouldn't be affected by Mr. Gate. Even if Mr. Gate were a true god, let alone a quasi-god, he couldn't possibly affect all extraordinary beings of his pathway. If he could, those pirates with the same tyrant pathway would have already been killed by the Lord of Storms. Furz was affected because the bracelet she wore bore the mark of an extraordinary characteristic left by Mr. Gate. That's why she was marked by him. During the full moon and red moon, the fallen mother's power would be greatly amplified, allowing Mr. Gate to use her power to transmit his delirium. He estimated that if Mr. Gate still had any bloodline remaining, he would also be affected by the delirium. Don't use this bracelet anymore, and you won't be affected by the delirium. Thank you for your help, Furz replied, trembling with fear. The slight aftershock of the clash between the fallen mother and George's mental powers had almost caused her mental breakdown. After calming Furz's unstable mind with a wave of his hand, George took her back to Backland, ending the evening's activities. Over the next few days, George digested the knowledge he had gained from Mr. Door and the fallen mother while simultaneously converting his location-finding magic. Done. On Sunday morning, George, being held by his mother Chris, slowly opened his eyes. He had finally completely converted the laws of his location-finding magic according to the power system of this world. Direction manifestation, Rosal Gustav. As the location-finding magic was cast, Rosal's location gradually appeared in George's mind. Someone of Rosal's level would be disturbed even by using the divination methods of the entire world to find his location, even by a true god. But the principle of George's location-finding magic was completely different from the divination methods of this world. It was a different system of magical power. Therefore, it would not be affected by the anti-divination magic of this world. So he easily found the exact location of Rosal's soul. Looks like I can notify Bernadette to rescue Rosal first. Bernadette hasn't contacted him yet, probably because she hasn't found the nameless island. As for the fallen mother goddess he'll inevitably encounter when rescuing Rosal, the fallen mother goddess's true form can't enter Earth. At most, she can only output some power through Rosal, who has been corrupted by her, which he doesn't care about. He can simply take Rosal into his own world. Once he takes her into his own world, he can directly isolate the fallen mother goddess's power output. He can also easily remove the corruption from Rosal's soul using the laws of the world. Huh? What a thick fog. Just as George was thinking about going to Bernadette that night and getting things done today, he heard his mother, Chris, suddenly make a questioning sound. He looked up and followed his mother Chris's gaze, only to find that the entire East District was instantly shrouded in a thick fog. This is the power of the witch's path. Based on the knowledge he had previously obtained from the primordial witch, George immediately recognized that the thick fog rising in the East District was no ordinary fog. Instead, it is a plague mist spread by the Witch of Despair, Sequence 4 of the Witch Path, which can bring deadly diseases to ordinary people. Chapter 781 Believe in the Fool, and you will have eternal life. The Witch's Path Sequence 4, the Despair Witch, possesses a terrifying, catastrophic ability. She can target the bodies of common creatures, primarily infecting organs like the heart, brain, and lungs to spread disease and plague. From the incubation period to the onset of illness and its progression to severity, only a few seconds are needed. A minute later, the target may be near death. The coverage is extremely wide. However, this only works on ordinary people. Its effectiveness against extraordinary individuals is greatly reduced. What is the witch cult trying to do? Creating this level of disaster in Backlund, are they out of their minds? A flicker of doubt crossed George's eyes. Backlund is the capital of Rune, home to demigods from the 3 major churches, numerous extraordinary individuals and sealed artifacts, as well as royal angels. Even demigod-level cultists have to keep a low profile here. If angel-level cultists dared to come, they might directly incur divine punishment from the goddess of night and the lord of storms. The witch cult isn't the Aurora Society's madness. They wouldn't do something so irrational. Unless the benefits far outweigh the risks, or the risks are not that great. No way. George's heart skipped a beat, and he began to speculate. Who benefits the most from such a massive disaster created by the witch cult? Undoubtedly, it's the royal family. With this fog and the massive deaths it caused, the royal family can smoothly implement their reform policies and complete the Black Emperor ritual. At the same time, they can divert the church's attention, distracting them from investigating the ruins. If the royal family and the witch cult cooperate, then the witch cult won't have to worry about being hunted down by the royal angels. The royal family and the church have an agreement that the church cannot permanently station any extraordinary beings above Sequence 4 in Backlund. Therefore, the archbishops of the 3 major churches in Backlund are at most Sequence 4 demigods. Even if they are also Sequence 4, the Witch of Despair from the witch cult, if well prepared, could actually escape after releasing the plague. If that's the case, the Rune royal family really deserves to die, George muttered to himself. He could understand human trafficking, building mausoleums, and advancing to Black Emperor to break free from the church's control. Releasing the slaves afterward and granting them civilian status wouldn't be too excessive. If it were him, he would have made a similar choice. At most, it would be considered a failure to manage his subordinates. However, cooperating with the witch cult to release this plague, if left unchecked, could have killed hundreds of thousands of ordinary people. That's utterly shameless. Alright, let's take this opportunity to declare ourselves fools and set an anchor point for ourselves. Using illusion magic to control Chris's return home, George created a thought entity, transforming into the same passerby he'd seen in Tingen. Spreading 12 pairs of angel wings, a single flap brought him to the skies above the eastern district of Backlund. Giant. 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 The thought entity unleashed a giantification spell, its body rapidly expanding, transforming into a towering giant angel in the blink of an eye. Inhale, he took a deep breath, like a dragon drawing in water, drawing all the spreading fog into his lungs. This plague, which only works on ordinary people, was automatically filtered out upon entering his body, rendering it completely ineffective. I am Archangel A under the Fool, commanded by the Fool to save you mortals. A megaphone spell amplified his voice throughout Backlund. Then he flapped his wings, unleashing a massive burst of light magic that enveloped everything recently ravaged by the plague. Those lowly commoners who had collapsed from the plague and were on the verge of death instantly felt their bodies purified, returning to their best condition. Even ailments spurred by overwork healed spontaneously. Some even experienced the regeneration of missing limbs. Believe in the Fool, and you will have eternal life, George shouted, then, sensing the faint lightning in the sky, vanished immediately. Such a commotion would surely attract the attention of the goddess of night and the lord of storms. The goddess of night was unaffected. If she were going to intervene, she would have already. But the lord of storms, discovering a strange angel preaching and trying to steal his followers, would certainly not be pleased. If he had been any later, he would have been met with a deluge of lightning. His physical body was naturally unafraid of the lightning, but it was, after all, just a manifestation of his thoughts. If it were shattered by the lightning, it would damage his newly established image. So, taking advantage of the fact that the Lord of Storms had just focused his gaze on him and hadn't yet reacted, he retreated first. The lightning flickered a few times in the clouds, but gradually dissipated because it couldn't find George's manifestation of his thoughts. Meanwhile, on the eastern side, the tens of thousands of civilians who had escaped death watched the giant angel disappear from the sky and knelt down in devout worship. Regardless of which god they had previously worshipped, they had now converted to the fool who had given them new life. As for the Despair Witch who had just released the plague and disguised herself as an ordinary person to leave Backland by carriage, she was completely stunned. The fool? An archangel? In her more than 100 years of life, she had never heard of the fool before. And what kind of sequence was that archangel? How could he heal so many people at once, even those missing limbs? A cultivator sequence? A pharmacist sequence? But these two sequences involve the Church of the Earth Mother in the Rose School, as well as that group of ancient vampires. What does it have to do with the fool? The three major churches and the royal family were just as bewildered as the Despair Witch. They were all like fruits of bewilderment, sitting side by side, each with a fruit of bewilderment. The archangel under the fool. Indeed, the fool is an ancient and righteous deity. Our Tarot Society is truly amazing. Audrey, Hugh, and Furs, members of the Tarot Society in Backland, were among the few who weren't completely bewildered. This place is no place to linger. Realizing what had happened, the Despair Witch immediately steered the carriage and began fleeing out of Backland. Although the plague hadn't killed anyone, her mission was complete, and the royal family could still use the fog incident to implement their policies. Creating another fog now would be suicidal. Not to mention whether the vanished angel would reappear and slap her to death. The three major churches weren't pushovers either. They were probably already tracking her. Unfortunately, she was too late. The carriage was forced to stop just as it started moving. The person who arrived was none other than George's true form in his infant state. He had prevented his thought form from acting earlier so that his true form could act now. The Witch of Despair was a Sequence 4 powerhouse of the witch cult. If his true form defeated her, he could go to Crest to exchange for a Sequence 4 potion. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 782 The Holy Infant George. It's you, Holy Infant George. Upon seeing George standing before the carriage, the Witch of Despair's expression immediately turned serious. Holy Infant George, a suddenly appearing, unknown Sequence powerhouse. A wild extraordinary being who didn't belong to either the Church of the Goddess of Night or the Church of the Lord of Storms, yet unusually well regarded by both churches. Even the archbishops of both churches treated him with great friendliness. Recently, he had helped the church kill and capture the pirate General Killingus and Mr. A of the Aurora Society, his strength suspected to be that of a Sequence 4 demigod. This was all information provided by Butas, the mysterious saint recently sent by the royal family and the Aurora Society. They called this powerful infant Holy Infant George. I didn't expect I'd even have a nickname. Hearing the endlessly charming witch before him, George raised his little hand and touched his chin. No wonder Roselle, knowing the details of the witch sequence, still couldn't resist entering the cave 3 times. I don't think we need to fight. Look, no one is injured, and many have recovered. Why don't you let me go? The witch, dressed in a plain white robe, appearing somewhat holy, deliberately bent her upper body, revealing a patch of snow-white flesh beneath. Even if the other person's body was an infant, their soul might be a parasite. Even if the other person was truly an infant, they would still be tempted by the witch's allure. However, she didn't really believe that she could persuade a potentially demigod-level powerhouse to let her go through temptation. So, as George instinctively reached towards his chest, she launched her attack. Got you! Countless unseen gazes burst forth from her body, like spiders hunting, trying to cocoon George. Disease. At the same time, she unleashed her full power of disease. However, this time it wasn't spreading throughout the entire Eastern District, but concentrated entirely on George. A disease spread to its maximum extent could only kill ordinary people, but if concentrated on one person, even a demigod would be greatly affected. But that wasn't all. She raised her hands, and countless black flames and ice crystal spears appeared, all hurtling towards George. She had to finish off George as quickly as possible to escape Backland. Otherwise, if George held her back and the church arrived, she would be doomed. A petty trick. Facing the ultimate attack of the Sequence 4 Despair Witch, George snorted coldly and his body trembled. The countless invisible threads that could cut steel into pieces were all shattered and dissipated into the air. Then he inhaled, drawing all the black flames into his mouth. With another exhale, the black flames transformed into a giant blue fire dragon that flew out, shattering the ice crystals and biting at the Despair Witch. Snap! The Despair Witch's body was bitten by the blue fire dragon and shattered into fragments like a mirror. Almost simultaneously, the Despair Witch reappeared in the distance. But she didn't try to attack again. Instead, she fled rapidly into the distance. In just one exchange, she understood that she was no match for George. Her all-out attack had no effect on George, and his casual retort made her feel threatened. "Do you think you can escape?" George's figure transformed into a streak of fire, appearing in front of the Witch of Despair and blocking her way again. Seeing this, the Witch of Despair quickly pulled out a mirror and plunged into it. Witches are skilled at manipulating mirrors, using them as decoys or to infiltrate the mirror world to escape danger. "Sorry, I'm quite knowledgeable about mirrors too," George smirked, also plunging into the mirror and quickly locking onto the Witch of Despair's location, blocking her way once more. "I'll fight you to the death." Seeing that even entering the mirror world couldn't escape George's pursuit, the Witch of Despair felt a sense of despair. With a scream, her black hair exploded, transforming into snakeheads that spewed energy, her body swelling to 5 or 6 meters tall, and she pounced towards George. "This is a semi-mythical form." George tilted his head, already having reached a conclusion. Those who reach Sequence 4 in extraordinary beings are called demigods because they can manifest a mythical form. In this mythical form, a Sequence 4 being experiences a significant power boost, and their appearance is no longer that of a normal human. Some lower sequence extraordinary beings might even be corrupted and lose control upon seeing this mythical form. However, aside from a very few specific sequences, normal demigods do not manifest a mythical form at the Sequence 4 stage. They cannot control this form and might lose control, transforming into monsters. The Witch of Despair, in order to defeat the terrifying George, has now manifested an incomplete mythical form. This greatly enhances her power while allowing her to barely maintain her sanity. Given enough time, she can recover. "It's time to end this." Raising his right hand, George faced the charging Witch of Despair and slapped her downwards. The powerful air pressure exploded, shattering the mirror world and returning the two to the normal world. Simultaneously, the slap landed squarely on the Witch of Despair's head. Due to the speed, the Witch of Despair didn't even have time to react, let alone use her mirror stand to dodge. How could this be? The Despair Witch, in her semi-mythical state, had a vacant look in her eyes. She felt countless cracks appear in her powerful body, threatening to collapse at any moment. Then, her eyes rolled back, and she collapsed to the ground. "Let's see what kind of conspiracy you're plotting." George waved his hand, extracting the extraordinary characteristics from the Despair Witch's body. He began to search the Despair Witch's soul. After a moment, he had digested all of the Despair Witch's memories of the past 100 years. The Despair Witch's name was Panacea. Like other witches, she was originally male, but later became female due to the witch sequence. Then, after 100 years, she finally advanced to Sequence 4. This time, she was ordered to come to Backland, partly to cooperate with a witch cult and the royal family to obtain the extraordinary characteristics of the Red Priest Sequence 1 Conqueror. On the other hand, she was also secretly cultivating a vessel for the descent of the priestess, allowing the priestess to descend smoothly. The Red Priest pathway and the Witch pathway are adjacent pathways and can be converted into each other. The Witch pathway symbolizes the ultimate yin of the original creator, and at Sequence 7, a man will become a woman. The Red Ritual pathway symbolizes the ultimate yang of the primordial creator, transforming a woman into a man during the 4th sequence. The primordial witch is the true god of the Witch pathway, and can grow stronger by absorbing the uniqueness and extraordinary characteristics of the Red Ritual. Witches who wish to revert to men can also undergo this transformation through the extraordinary characteristics of the Red Ritual. Therefore, the witch cult places great importance on the extraordinary characteristics of the Red Ritual pathway. Chapter 783 Heading to the Nameless Island. They really did cooperate with the royal family. After reading the memories of the Witch of Despair, George shook his head. His previous guesses were basically correct. The royal family did indeed cooperate with the witch cult. The purpose of creating this fug was to complete the ritual, cover up the fact of human trafficking, and confuse the church. Moreover, They not only cooperated with the witch cult but also with the Aurora Society. Afterwards, the Aurora Society was willing to take the blame for the Backland Fog incident to draw the church's wrath on the royal family and the witch cult, since they weren't afraid of being hunted down by the church. They had always been the church's #1 enemy. But the condition was that the royal family would help them complete the descent of the true creator. They had already chosen the vessel for the true creator, and it was someone George knew. It was that con man, Lennius, who had swindled his parents out of money and was also induced by Aunt Zangwill to impregnate his older cousin, becoming the vessel for the true creator's descent. Now he was reaping what he sowed, forcibly imprisoned in the dock area by the Aurora Society's extraordinary members, waiting to be favored by the true creator. Take this to the church. Now we not only have the sequence 4 potion, but also clues to the subsequent potions. While the Church of the Dark Goddess doesn't have the Diviner's Path potion recipes, they do have related clues. However, these clues naturally require George to exchange something more valuable. The royal family, in cooperation with the Twilight Hermits, the Witch Cult, and the Aurora Society, are supporting George III in building his mausoleum, preparing for his ascension to the Black Emperor. They also intend to summon the true creator and the primordial witch. This information is more than enough to exchange for clues to the subsequent potion recipes and materials. After all, it's just clues, not a direct exchange for potions and recipes. As for how the Church of the Dark Goddess will handle it, that's their business. If they can't handle it, so be it. He can use Roselle to thoroughly rip off the royal family and George III. The ritual for advancing to Sequence 4 Trickster involves murdering a demigod-level powerhouse in front of a large audience. Murdering a Sequence 1 powerhouse is certainly possible, and even more effective. How about we replace the entire royal family? George stroked his chin, a plan forming in his mind. Carrying the subdued Lady of Despair, George transformed into a streak of fire and went directly to the Church of the Goddess of Night, finding Crestes. Crestes was leading a group of Red Gloves, preparing to investigate in the East District. Seeing George's sudden appearance, he immediately said, "George, come with us to the East District, we need your help." The fog incident had happened too quickly, they hadn't had time to gather enough manpower, and George's arrival was just in time. "No need, I've already brought her." George threw the unconscious, now ordinary Lady of Despair, onto the ground. Sequence 4 Panacea of the Witch Cult, nicknamed Despair Nightingale, Lady of Despair, she's the one who released the fog in an attempt to kill everyone in the East District. The Witch Cult's Despair Nightingale, Crestes and his Red Gloves, hearing George's words and looking at the unconscious Lady of Despair, all widened their eyes. They had barely reacted and were about to leave when George had already captured her and brought her back. Although they knew George's improved flame leap ability allowed him to traverse Backland at will and reach the East District instantly, a demigod of Sequence 4 via the Witch Path was no easy opponent. Especially this Nightingale of Despair, an old nemesis. And from the time the fog rose until now, it seemed less than 5 minutes had passed. In other words, George found the witch, engaged in battle, and captured her alive with almost no effort. "I'll apply for a Sequence 4 potion for you immediately," Crest A, knowing George well, stated directly the reward for capturing the Witch of Despair. George smiled upon hearing this. "No rush, I have more important information to tell you." "Alright, let's go inside and talk." Crest A nodded, instructing the Red Gloves captain to take his team to the East District for routine investigations and to notify the other churches that the murderer had been apprehended. 10 minutes later, Crestes said to George with a solemn expression, "If what you said is true, it's enough to exchange for clues to the next stage of the Diviner's Sequence potion and the potion formula. I will report this truthfully to the Archbishop." "That's good. I'll take my leave now. Come back tonight to pick up the potion and related clues." George didn't waste any words and transformed into a streak of fire to go home. After arriving home, he used the fire orb he had left for Bernadette to transmit his voice, "Come to Backland. I found the location of the nameless island. See you at the usual place." Now that he had converted to the magic of finding people, there was no time to lose. He needed to go and rescue Rosal as soon as possible. If he delayed for a few days and Rosal couldn't resist the corruption of the fallen Mother Goddess and completely became her puppet, it would be too late. Although the chances were small, there was no need to take the risk. Anyway, he didn't have anything else to do now, and at his speed, he should be able to handle it before nightfall. On the bridge in Backland, a figure traversed from the spirit world. It was Rosal's daughter, Bernadette. You've found the location of Father's tomb. Her expression was somewhat excited. Ever since she had hope of rescuing her father, she had spent most of her time in the kingdom of Intis searching for clues about the nameless island. Although she had made some progress, it would probably take at least several more months to completely obtain the coordinates of the nameless island. I found it, and I can confirm that Rosal is indeed not dead. George nodded. If Rosal were completely dead, his search magic would be fruitless. Bernadette's eyes immediately reddened upon hearing this. Then let's set off now, first to the kingdom of Intis, and then take a boat to the island. She wasn't a gate sequence traveler and couldn't freely travel through the spirit realm to appear anywhere in the world. The reason she could instantly travel from the kingdom of Intis to Backland was because she had left coordinates here in advance using her powerful occult knowledge, allowing her to quickly arrive through the spirit realm. She had never been to the nameless island, so naturally she couldn't use the spirit realm to travel there. She had to take a boat there properly. No need for all that trouble, I'll take you straight there. George waved his hand. He could fly Bernadette there directly. He had already converted his flight magic when he was researching the extraordinary characteristics of wind-chosen ones. At his current flying speed, he could reach the destination in a few seconds at full speed. By the way, before that, take one more person with you. He has some connection with your father. George flashed and appeared next to Tingen Klein. He was a fake fellow countryman. Klein was the real Roselle, and the two were practically bunkmates in Source Castle. Chapter 784 Another Clash with a Fallen Mother Goddess. Sequence 7? How could someone so young have a connection with my father? Bernadette looked puzzled when she saw George appear with Klein, who was only Sequence 7. She believed that George had a connection with her father. His immense strength, mysterious abilities, and ability to read her father's diary suggested he might be from the same era as her father, or even older. But this young man was only Sequence 7. It was impossible for him to have any connection with her father. Could he be a descendant of one of her father's friends? Bernadette Gustave, although she didn't quite believe it, now wasn't the time to dwell on it, so she greeted him. Klein Moretti. Klein also politely replied, secretly admiring Wang Tao's daughter's strength and beauty. Seriously, Bernadette should call Klein Uncle Joe. George chuckled to himself as he saw the two greet each other. Let's go. With a wave of his hand, he used magic to envelop Bernadette and Klein, and the three of them transformed into a shooting star, leaving Backland and flying towards the sea. Soon, a mysterious island covered by giant, deep green trees appeared before them. Danger! 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 Klein's spiritual intuition warned him incessantly the moment he saw the island. If he entered alone, he would surely die. Bernadette also observed the island with her abilities, her expression gradually becoming serious. But after a moment, her seriousness transformed into a smile. Even as a Sequence 3 being, she couldn't see through the island, indicating that it contained a terrifying danger beyond Sequence 3. This also indirectly proved that this island was very likely the location of her father's last mausoleum. As expected, the power of the fallen mother goddess is present. George's spiritual sense covered the entire island, immediately sensing the power of the fallen mother goddess he had just fought. He also sensed a powerful soul trapped in the center of the island. This island may contain the power of a true god. It's better if we slowly explore from the outer perimeter, Bernadette quickly advised as George led them directly towards the island's center. This small island was her father's last mausoleum after becoming a god, containing the Black Emperor's true god-level power. If, as previously speculated, her father couldn't be resurrected due to corruption by an outer god, then there must be an even more terrifying outer god's power within. George is incredibly mysterious and powerful, but even at her strongest, she's at most an angel, incapable of directly confronting a true god. She carried several powerful level 0 sealing artifacts left to her by her father, which, combined with her and George's strength, would greatly reduce the danger if they were cautious. What? True god-level power? Klein's expression changed drastically upon hearing this. George had told him to come find his fellow villager Wang Tao, but hadn't mentioned facing true god-level power. No wonder his spiritual intuition had been giving him a frantic warning even before they entered the island. Can we withstand it? He turned to look at George, feeling somewhat uneasy. That was true god-level power. Even with George's refinement of the Source Castle and her innate divine strength, it seemed very risky. George gave Klein a reassuring look, then said to Bernadette, I've located Rosal's soul, it's trapped in the center of the island. The main danger on this island comes from the fallen mother goddess. I fought her before, Her true form is above the red moon, and she was no match for me through the barrier. She actually fought an outer god, and even seemed to have the upper hand? Could she already be a true god? Bernadette's pupils constricted. After a brief hesitation, she chose to believe George. However, she remained tense, intending to use the sealing artifact her father had left her if anything went wrong. Go! George waved his hand, and the three of them descended directly towards the entrance to Rosal's tomb in the center of the island. Just as they were about to land, the nearby giant trees seemed to come alive instantly, rising from the ground and transforming into bloodthirsty tree men, charging towards George and his companions. At the same time, various extraordinary creatures on the island also seemed to go berserk, rushing forward along with the tree men. And that wasn't all. The moon suddenly shone brightly in broad daylight, and a unique power of law instantly enveloped the island, concentrating on Bernadette, George, and Clyde. Under the influence of this power, three hearts suddenly began to beat within their bellies, and their bellies began to swell at a visible speed. From the size of a grain of rice to the size of a raisin to the size of a date, if left unchecked, the three of them might give birth to 3 children in less than half an hour. Even if 2 of them were not women at all. Is this the most essential power of the fallen mother goddess? George sneered upon seeing this, and the date-sized embryos rapidly degenerated, disappearing in the blink of an eye. His body was so terrifying that even a true god couldn't repair it. How could it be easily affected by the fallen mother goddess separated by the barrier of earth? Moreover, as a peak powerhouse of a single universe who created the universe, he was also very proficient in the laws of creation and the cycle of death. He reached out and patted Klein's shoulder, instantly expelling the power of the fallen mother goddess from Klein's body. When he was about to help Bernadette expel the power of the fallen mother goddess, he found that she had already saved herself. As expected of the founder and leader of the Dawn of Elements, she does have some skill, although Bernadette is a Sequence 3, with the blessing of the sealing artifact left by her father, she can hold her own against even a Sequence 1 for a short time. Just now, when she realized something was wrong with her body, she immediately took out the sealing artifact her father left her, the Sage's Ford ornament, and put it on her head. This sealing artifact allows her body to become ethereal, decomposing into streams of complex knowledge, turning her into a pure information-flowing being. In this way, the infant catalyzed by the power of the fallen mother goddess naturally ceases to exist. However, even after resolving the corruption of the fallen mother goddess's power, Bernadette's complexion did not improve, because there were still those Trents and countless extraordinary creatures outside to deal with. Furthermore, she felt an even more terrifying power eroding her body, a power of activation. It seemed to want every part of her body to develop its own consciousness, thus breaking free from her control. Just then, she heard George's chanting. Super magic, fairy law. Huge magic circles appeared above the island, followed by a dazzling white light enveloping the entire island. When the white light dissipated, the power of the Black Trents, the extraordinary creatures, and the fallen mother goddess had all vanished. Chapter 785. Some people may be alive, but they are already dead. George's super magic, unleashed with his physical life force, was absolutely at the level of a true god. Rosal's remaining Black Emperor power, lacking uniqueness and extraordinary characteristics, no longer reached the level of a true god. His uniqueness and extraordinary characteristics were now likely in the hands of the lone royal family. While the fallen mother goddess was strong, she couldn't penetrate much power through the screen of the original creator. Moreover, it was daytime, not a full moon or a red moon. Therefore, once George's fairy law was invoked, everything he considered an enemy would be mercilessly judged and destroyed. Sequence 0. This guy is definitely a Sequence 0 true god. Bernadette's eyes were filled with horror as she looked at George. As Rosal's daughter, the former princess of Intis, the founder and leader of the elemental dawn, and one of the 4 kings of the sea, the mysterious queen, she had witnessed the power of a Sequence 1, and even, with the help of several sealed artifacts, could briefly unleash the power of a Sequence 1. George's attack just now had definitely exceeded the limits of a Sequence 1. The key point is that after delivering that blow, George didn't seem to be struggling at all, appearing quite relaxed. Coupled with what George had said earlier, she was now completely certain that George was definitely a Sequence 0 true god level being. Fellow countrymen, you're too powerful. Klein was equally startled. He knew George was formidable, but he hadn't expected him to be this strong. However, this was naturally a good thing for him. The stronger George was, the greater the chance of rescuing Rosal, and the safer this trip would be. Once Rosal was rescued, he would essentially have two true Gauntlet-level fellow countrymen protecting him. Wouldn't that be a guaranteed win in the future? Done. George waved his hand, leading Bernadette and Klein through the gates of Rosal's mausoleum. The mausoleum was empty, with only dark walls and a high platform in the center, upon which sat a throne prepared for giants. There was no one on the throne, seemingly waiting for its emperor's return. The Eye of Secrets. Bernadette reached up and touched her forehead, and an eye appeared on her forehead. This triggered a change within the mausoleum. A massive shadow appeared before the three, letting out a painful howl. I've been corrupted. Leave. Leave this place. It was none other than the soul of the deceased Rosal. While George was cleansing the power of the fallen mother outside the mausoleum, his corruption had lessened, and he regained some of his sanity. However, he knew the fallen mother's terror, knowing that his sanity would soon be eroded by her, plunging him back into a tug-of-war. At that point, he would undoubtedly be controlled by the fallen mother to attack the three. He had already recognized that the one who had used the Eye of Secrets was his beloved eldest daughter, Bernadette, and he didn't want to harm her. Father, unconcealed sorrow filled Bernadette's eyes. At this moment, cracks began to appear in Rosal's soul, as if moonlight was trying to squeeze out. Rosal tried desperately to mend these cracks with shadow, blocking the moonlight from seeping out. But no matter how he mended them, more cracks appeared. Don't panic, old Wong, let me lend you a hand. George raised his hand, and a magic circle appeared above Rosal's head. Activating the fairy law once more. I won't let you get away with this. A dazzling light enveloped Rosal's shadow, forcefully wiping away the blood-red moonlight, leaving only an angry scream echoing within the mausoleum. Without the corruption of the fallen mother goddess, Rosal's reason returned completely, transforming him into the majestic emperor depicted on the blasphemy tablet. He opened his eyes and looked at George and Klein. Heavenly King covers the earth tiger, Pagoda suppresses the river demon, chicken stew with mushrooms. George and Klein exchanged a smile, offering their respective answers with a touch of helplessness. Rosal instantly understood, knowing he had guessed correctly. Because the words George had just spoken were neither in Rune, Dutan, Highland, nor ancient Fursak, ancient Hermes, giant, dragon, or elven languages. They were in Mandarin, and he was calling him Old Wong, not Rosal. So his first thought was that the two people who came with his daughter were likely from his hometown. Now, after testing them, he was right. We'll talk about thanks later. You and your daughter chat first, we'll wait for you outside. George gestured to Rosal, then led Klein out of the mausoleum, leaving the father and daughter alone. Thank you so much, Rosal nodded gratefully, hugging his daughter who was already weeping. I never imagined my little princess would become such a big shot on the mystical world, capable of saving her poor old father. Outside the mausoleum, Klein asked curiously, did you tell Bernadette everything in old Wong's diary? Wong Tao's diary was truly a diary. If his daughter read it, it would be a disaster. No, I only read a small part to gain her trust. George couldn't help but smile slightly. But a small section was about witches. That, Klein looked back at the mausoleum, a look of pity on his face, muttering, some people are dead, but still alive, while others are alive, but already dead. There's no other way. If I didn't do it this way, Bernadette would definitely make me translate all the contents of the diary. Then even his fact that he came from before the first age would be exposed. George shrugged. Actually, this was just his excuse. It was mainly out of a wicked sense of humor. Craven remained non-committal. As clever as he was, he had already seen through George's excuse. Inside, the father and daughter, who hadn't seen each other for a long time, talked for more than an hour before gradually calming down and walking out of the mausoleum. Just as they reached the gate, Bernadette suddenly turned to her father. Father, now that you've been resurrected, you can find another girl to be your queen, but you can't find another witch. Rosal's body stiffened instantly. After a long pause, he coughed and forced a serious expression, saying, don't talk nonsense. My heart is only for your mother. How could I find another queen? I was corrupted back then, my mind was clouded, and I wrote nonsense in my diary. Much of it isn't true. Oh, Bernadette deliberately drawled, and without waiting for her father to explain further, she strode out of the mausoleum. This great figure of the mystical world, in front of her father, seemed to have reverted to the girl she once was. Here, have some melon seeds. George, who had overheard the entire conversation in the mausoleum, chuckled inwardly and produced a handful of melon seeds, handing them to Klein. Chapter 786. I really only have sequence 5. You know the truth about time travel. On the grass outside the mausoleum, Roselle looked at George and Klein. They both nodded simultaneously. Yes, you know this is Earth, that we didn't time travel, and that we can't go back, Roselle confirmed again. George and Klein nodded again. Bernadette, however, looked completely bewildered. What time travel? What Earth? What can't go back? From the conversation between her father and George, she could tell that the three did indeed have some special relationship. But as a master of the occult, she couldn't understand what they were talking about. There's no need to hide it from you now. Actually, your father, come from before the first era. Back then, Roselle slowly recounted his situation. I originally thought I had traveled to another world and would eventually have a chance to return to my homeland. It wasn't until the successful moon landing and seeing the true appearance of this planet from the moon that I confirmed I hadn't traveled through time. He couldn't help but sigh. When I landed on the moon, I clearly felt an immense crisis, but I never imagined I would be corrupted. Fortunately, amidst the strange looks from those around me, I gradually realized this and began to switch to the Black Emperor's path, hoping to use the Black Emperor's return after death to escape the corruption. In a way, I also used the Eternal Sun and the God of Steam and Machines. Unfortunately, the outer god who corrupted me was already stronger than a true god, reaching the level of the ancients. Even if I were resurrected, I would still be corrupted again. So I had to stop the resurrection and eke out a living here. The outer god who corrupted you is called the Fallen Mother Goddess, who split from the first creator and then gave birth to. George briefly explained the information about the Fallen Mother Goddess. Roselle suddenly realized, no wonder it was so terrible. It seems that when I first discovered this island, it was already corrupted. That's why I contacted Mr. Men and was lured to the moon. But his condition is probably even worse than mine now. He's also a victim. I contacted Mr. Men, and he's indeed been corrupted to the point of almost losing all his sanity. George nodded. Wong Tao could at least maintain his sanity and fight against a Fallen Mother, while Mr. Men was basically controlled by the Fallen Mother except for occasional moments of lucidity. Anyway, thank you so much. Thank you for coming to save me. Just tell me if you need anything, and I'll do it if I can. Roselle thanked George and Klein again. Although they were from the same hometown, they didn't know each other, and he was still very grateful that they came to save him when they knew the Fallen Mother was in such a great crisis. No need to thank me. It was mainly George who helped. I was just here to make up the numbers. Klein shrugged. George chuckled. It's alright, we're from the same hometown, and Bernadette paid me. I know, the magic lamp is nice, but it's not worth the risk you took to save me. Roselle nodded. Bernadette had already recounted the entire story of how she met George in the mausoleum, so he knew about the magic lamp. However, compared to the danger of facing the Fallen Mother Goddess, the lamp's value was negligible. I heard from Bebe that you're collecting the blasphemous tokens. I can tell you all the knowledge of the 22 sequences. By the way, which sequence are you? In his view, only the potion recipes and related knowledge of the 22 sequences could barely repay this favor. Perhaps in modern society, he would just be a nerdy, science-oriented young man. But the many years of experience since his awakening had made him a truly mature and wise person. He understood that while they were from the same hometown, to truly form an alliance with George, a true God-level powerhouse, they still needed to establish a solid relationship of mutual benefit. Although the pollution problem had been solved, it didn't mean he could return smoothly as the Black Emperor. Back then, the Eternal Sun and the God of Steam and Machinery joined forces to destroy him during his ascension ceremony. How could they not try to stop him upon sensing his resurrection? Therefore, when he truly returns as the Black Emperor, he still needs George to protect him. Then tell me all the knowledge of the Diviner's sequence first. I'm currently preparing to advance to sequence 4. George wasn't surprised by Wong Tao's reward and readily accepted it. Part of the reason he rescued Wong Tao was for the knowledge of the 22 sequence paths that Wong Tao possessed. The Church of the Goddess of Night only provided clues. He still needed to use those clues to find the subsequent potion recipes and materials. Now, he could directly obtain the potion recipes from Wong Tao, allowing him to focus on finding the potion materials. Moreover, he had already found the sequence 2 potion materials. The magic lamp contained the extraordinary characteristics of sequence 2 for his path. Therefore, he only needed to find the sequence 3 and sequence 1 potion materials, as well as the uniqueness of sequence 0. Brother, don't tell me you're only a sequence 5 mystic puppet master. Hearing George's words, Roselle and Bernadette's faces were filled with strange expressions. They were joking, of course. A Sequence 5 Mystic Puppet Master could unleash an attack of that level, repel an old one-level Fallen Mother Goddess, and exorcise corruption? One was a Sequence 3 Prophecy Master of the Hermit Path, and the other was a Sequence 2 Mentor of the Perfect Path, a Sequence 1 Knowledge Emperor of the Hermit Path, and a Sequence 0 Black Emperor of the Black Emperor Path. They were both people with the deepest understanding of mysticism. A Sequence 5 Extraordinary, even with the most powerful sealed artifacts, couldn't possibly contend with an old one. That was too unmystical. The father and daughter felt that George was joking with them. As for Klein, he wasn't surprised. After all, he had been surprised by George's strength far too many times. To be honest, it was impossible not to have doubts. George's previous statements, compared to the strength and methods he had displayed, had many loopholes. However, he didn't say anything, because there was no need. Everyone has secrets they don't want others to know, and being overly curious to investigate is not a wise thing to do. He only needed to know that George meant him no harm and had even helped him a lot. That was enough. I really am only Sequence 5. George released his concealed aura, revealing his extraordinary Sequence 5 characteristics. He needed to advance to Sequence 4 and then Sequence 3. There was no need to fake it or hide it. It's just that I have some powers beyond the normal sequence pathways. You can think of it as my cheat ability. Cheat ability, huh? When I first woke up, I wanted to awaken a cheat ability every day, but unfortunately, I didn't. Rosa wisely didn't delve deeper, only showing an envious expression. Chapter 787 The Plan for Resurrection. Not bad. After obtaining all the occult knowledge about the Diviner's Path from Wang Tao, George's face showed a satisfied expression. The Diviner's Path, Sequence 4, Trickster, not only has all its abilities greatly enhanced by Sequence 5, but it can also create spirit worms. Furthermore, as long as the puppets are not completely dead, they can be resurrected by the spirit worms, making them very difficult to kill. The Sequence 3, Ancient Scholar, with the greatly enhanced abilities of Sequence 4, has gained the ability to borrow power from its powerful past self when weakened, as well as the means to summon images from historical gaps. This means that it can summon images from historical gaps, which can be people or objects. The more detailed and accurate the understanding of the corresponding history and things, the higher the probability of success and the longer the effect lasts. For a normal ancient scholar, they can at most summon powerful figures from this world that they once knew well and some powerful sealed artifacts. But George is different. As for people, he knows more than just the powerful figures of this world. He knows the Vishanti and Eternals from the Marvel world, the creators of various clone worlds, and the 3 immortal maidens with whom he has recently developed a good relationship. Regarding artifacts, putting aside other things, what about the magical treasures of the primordial world? If he could successfully summon them, he could crush not only the ancient beings outside, but even the resurrected first creator. Of course, the greater the difference in strength, the harder it is to summon them successfully, and even if he did, he wouldn't be able to unleash their full power. But even so, it's already terrifying. Later, his avatar in that world became a disciple of the Tongshan sect master, spending every day by his side. Perhaps he could actually summon a Tongshan saint who could set up the immortal slaughtering sword formation. Sequence 2 Miracle Master, building on the abilities of Sequence 3, gains the ability to grant wishes. By collecting and fulfilling various wishes, he can accumulate wish power to create miracles. He can even be resurrected through miracles after being killed. Sequence 1 Mysterious Servant has 4 chances to resurrect, can tamper with and graft some laws and concepts, and possesses partial authority over the realms of concealment and change. He can create a prototype of a divine kingdom, the mysterious realm, just like the small world prototype he created before advancing to a single universe. Sequence 0 Fools, wielding partial authority over history, time, destiny, change, and secrets, are the symbol of blind folly in the realm of the mind. They excel at manipulating the intelligence and laws of all things in various ways, displaying incredible miracles. Their simplest application is directly lowering the enemy's intelligence through deception. Among the 22 sequence gods, they are an extremely extreme deity, capable of easily destroying a star, yet unable to directly confront their opponent, possessing lower defense than most sequence zeros. In short, they are similar to a high burst, high damage, fragile mage. Regarding your resurrection, I have an idea. I wonder if you'd be willing. Go ahead." Hearing about resurrection, Rosal immediately became serious. George quickly explained his plan. "The royal family of Rune is cooperating with the organization you once joined, preparing, so I think we can do this." "Brilliant. Let's do it." Rosal's eyes grew brighter as he listened to George's plan. He was currently in a semi-resurrected state. Once he continued resurrecting, he would forcibly reclaim the Black Emperor's unique and extraordinary characteristics held by the royal family. This would undoubtedly cause a significant commotion, likely alerting the 7 gods, some evil gods, and even some Sequence 1 beings. First, the Eternal Sun and the god of steam and machinery would immediately unleash divine punishment to stop him. They could tolerate the lone royal family producing a Black Emperor, as this would both bolster the forces of the outer gods' invasion and hinder the Church of the Goddess of Night and the Church of the Lord of Storms. However, they absolutely could not tolerate his resurrection and return as the Black Emperor, for they would certainly fear his retaliation. Second, they couldn't guarantee that the other righteous gods wouldn't intervene, nor could they guarantee that some troublesome evil gods wouldn't interfere. Finally, the lone royal family would never let a sure thing slip away. They would mobilize their entire force, possibly even incurring a great cost to have the witch cult and the Aurora Society help prevent his return. Therefore, even with George's immense power, he would likely struggle to cope with so many enemies. According to George's plan, he shouldn't rush his resurrection. He could wait until the royal family's ascension ceremony, then resurrect within the mausoleum prepared by the lone royal family, directly seizing the uniqueness and extraordinary characteristics of the Black Emperor prepared by George III. In this way, the 7 gods and those evil gods can be misled, making them temporarily believe that George III is ascending to godhood. By the time they realize what's happening, he will have already successfully resurrected and returned, and naturally, they will have nothing to fear. However, we still need to be careful. Now that I am free from corruption, if I want to resurrect, they will definitely sense it, unless they possess secret authority to conceal it. Matters concerning godhood are difficult to prevent from being sensed in advance by some related high-sequence beings. This is similar to spiritual intuition warnings. Especially Adam, who inherited the divinity of the ancient sun god and is of the dreamer sequence. Whatever he says will be known. As long as the Twilight Hermits are mentioned, or Adam's name is mentioned, even if it is just thought about in one's mind, it may be perceived by him. The matter of George III becoming a god was originally driven by Adam. If they want to sabotage it, without some concealment, Adam will definitely sense it in advance and thus hinder them. It's alright. I'll put you in the Source Castle first, using it as a cover. You can make your move at the last moment. Even if they sense something, it will be too late, George replied nonchalantly. Actually, keeping him in his own world would better isolate him from spiritual warnings, but given Wang Tao's former strength as the Black Emperor, he might discover some clues. So keeping him in the Source Castle was more suitable. The Source Castle would be just as effective in his hands as that of the Celestial Venerable. After agreeing on the details, George took Wang Tao into the Source Castle, sent Klein back to Tingen, retrieved the magic lamp from Bernadette, and returned to his home in Backlund. Upon returning home, he immediately entered his own world's planet and took out the magic lamp. The 5th sealed artifact, the wishing lamp, was entirely golden, resembling a miniature kettle, its surface covered with mysterious and complex symbols, with a wick protruding from the spout. Perhaps sensing George's malice, a distorted, pale golden figure quickly gathered above the wick. "You want to crush me?" The figure sensed the spiritual energy emanating from George, its tone tinged with doubt. How could a mere Sequence 5 pose a threat to me, let alone Sequence 5? Even a Sequence 0 true god couldn't destroy the divine lamp sealing him. Because this divine lamp was personally crafted by the cunning Celestial Venerable. Chapter 788 Devouring the Genie. Boy, I am the eternal genie of the lamp. I can grant you any wish, even if you want to become a true god. The golden figure didn't think much and habitually began to tempt him. What benefit would killing the lamp's owner bring him? Actually, there was no benefit. It wouldn't make him stronger, nor would it allow him to return to the starry sky and escape the lamp's seal. He was simply psychologically disturbed from being trapped in the lamp for too long and wanted some fun. Seeing the lamp's owner make a wish under his temptation and ultimately become a twisted monster would make him feel very good. If I wish for all your spiritual energy to belong to me, and for the extraordinary properties within the lamp to belong to me, can you grant it? George looked at the golden figure and said with a smile. The golden figure stiffened upon hearing this, Then its eyes darted around and it replied, "If you need it, of course. Oh, then I'll make that wish, and you grant it right now." George sat down on the ground and looked at the golden figure, wanting to see how this cunning genie would twist his wish. A strange smile appeared on the golden figure's face. "As long as I absorb you into the lamp and merge with you, my spiritual energy will become your spiritual energy, and the lamp's extraordinary properties will become your extraordinary properties." With that, the lamp immediately emitted a dazzling golden light, enveloping George, attempting to melt his body and absorb his soul. However, the golden light, when it shone on George, could neither melt his body nor shake his soul. How could this be? The golden figure's expression changed. Even a sequence 1 could not resist the power unleashed by the lamp when granting a wish, let alone someone who was only sequence 5. What a cunning fellow. "I don't need you to grant my wish, I can do it myself." George stood up, and the immense magical power within him erupted, shattering the golden light. In his own world, he needed no concealment and could unleash his full power. This terrifying power, the golden figure was immediately shocked by the energy erupting from George's body. Although he couldn't discern which energy sequence George possessed, its sheer size surpassed even his prime. It vaguely reminded him of facing that celestial venerable once more. Even a true god cannot destroy the magic lamp. "You are so powerful, how about we make a deal? I have a lot of information you need." "No need, I can obtain it directly from your mind." George's lips curled into a smile, and with a wave of his hand, chains manifesting from the laws of the world appeared out of thin air, binding the magic lamp tightly, then pulling it forcefully in all directions. Shatter! With a clenched fist, the chains of the world laws exerted their force, and the magic lamp exploded, shattering into countless fragments. "I am finally free." With the magic lamp shattered, the golden figure within was also freed, quickly attempting to escape towards the outer reaches of the planet. However, he froze on the spot as soon as he flew out of the planet. What's going on with this universe? There was no barrier from the primordial creator above the planet, no sun or moon outside, no spiritual energy, and no other outer gods like the fallen mother lurking in the shadows. There was only emptiness, nothingness at all. Seal. At that moment, George's enormous face materialized in the endless void. And the chains of the world's laws struck again. "Ah!" A scream rang out as the golden phantom was bound by the chains, its power sealed. Its memories and spiritual energy were extracted and transferred into George's body. "Ah!" George let out the same sound, but instead of a scream, it was a comfortable sound of absorbing a large amount of spiritual energy. 5 hours later, the golden phantom had completely dissipated. Not entirely, though. Its powerful soul essence remained, but its intelligence had been completely erased. "Disperse!" George waved his hand again, and the powerful soul essence was instantly shattered, transforming into a meteor that fell into the planet of his world. Immediately, countless intelligent beings began to be born on the previously relatively pristine planet. An evil god is still an evil god. If anyone had a sane brain, they might have already been unsealed. Shaking his head, George left his world. By reading the genie's memories, he realized that the genie's identity was indeed extraordinary. He was originally the third child of the first creator, the third brother of the fallen mother goddess and the mother tree of desire, the original form of the uncertain mist and eternity, and the third uncle or elder brother of the weaver of fate. He possessed the powerful source chaos kingdom and 3 sequence paths: Black Emperor, Judge, and Chaos Mist, Broker. When the first creator awoke, the source chaos kingdom was forcibly sucked into Earth. To reclaim his source, he successfully infiltrated Earth by exploiting a loophole in the barrier. Unfortunately, he didn't get his source and was completely deceived by the Celestial, losing all his sequence characteristics and having his consciousness sealed in the magic lamp, becoming one of the Celestial sealed artifacts. In George's view, if this guy had been even slightly more sincere over the years, finding a reliable magic lamp holder to help him grow stronger, he could have been sent into space long ago, escaping the magic lamp and returning to freedom. Basically, every sequence, once they reach sequence 1, can leave Earth and venture into space on their own. Once they reach sequence 0, they can use their divine kingdom to take their followers to find a new planet in the universe to live on. This is why Roselle was so determined to advance to sequence 0 after learning the truth about the apocalypse. Of course, it wasn't that easy in reality, because there were other gods eyeing Earth. If they abandoned Earth, a planet protected by the original creator, they would likely be overwhelmed and devoured by those other gods. The 7 gods didn't flee with their followers, but instead used their divine kingdoms to stabilize the original creator's barrier. They knew that if they couldn't win the apocalypse, they wouldn't be able to escape and would be devoured by the other gods. Now, my spiritual energy is no less than that of a true god. Back in his home, George felt the spiritual energy within him, a satisfied smile on his face. Although the child of chaos was incomplete, lacking extraordinary characteristics, its essence was too high, and its remaining spiritual energy was no less than that of an ordinary true god. He had now directly absorbed the spiritual energy of the child of chaos, so the spiritual energy within him had also reached the level of a true god. If it were an ordinary sequence 5, even with so much spiritual energy, they would still be sequence 5 and would not be able to unleash the strength of a true god. But he was different. What limited him was always the spiritual energy within him. As long as his spiritual energy was sufficient, the power of his transformed magic would not be less than that of a true god. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 789, Heading to the Hornach Mountains. I should go see Crest. Checking the time, George vanished from his house in a flash of light, arriving at the Church of the Goddess of Night, less than 100 meters from his home. Good evening, Crest. Good evening, George. Crest's furrowed brow relaxed slightly upon seeing George. You don't seem well. Something's on your mind. Without using his telepathic abilities, George could tell from Crest's expression that something was wrong. Sigh. Crest sighed and handed George a bottle of potion and a sealed document. This contains clues about the potion for advancing to sequence 4 Trickster, as well as clues about subsequent potions and potion ingredients. Is it about the royal family? George took the potion and the sealed document, already having a general idea in mind. Crest nodded. Based on the intelligence you provided, I captured the 2 vessels for the Aurora Society and the Witch Cult and reported this to the Pope. The Pope personally communicated with the royal angels, and as a result, he agreed to George II's ascension ceremony. He only requested that the royal family treat the slaves who built the mausoleum well and terminate their cooperation with the Aurora Society and the Witch Cult. Since the Pope made that decision, there must be a reason. Contact me anytime if you need anything. After listening, George patted Crest on the shoulder, offering a word of comfort, and then left. In fact, he had somewhat anticipated this outcome. In another 20 years or so, the barrier of the original creator would completely disappear, and Earth would have to face the ancient gods and their retinues whose power surpassed that of true gods. Therefore, if George III truly became the Black Emperor, the War of Apocalypse would gain an extra force. At that time, as long as the royal family was willing to distance itself from the cult, the 7 gods would most likely remain neutral. In addition, the goddess of darkness seemed to be devouring the uniqueness of the god of death and had no time to attend to other matters. At least that's how it appears. However, this isn't necessarily a bad thing for George. If the 7 gods disagreed with George II's ascension to godhood and directly intervened, his subsequent plans would be difficult to implement. Now that the 7 gods are neutral, when George III holds his ascension ceremony, he can have Rosal substitute for him and resurrect him. Let's look at the clues to the materials for the subsequent potion. He had already obtained the formula for the Fool's Path potion from Rosal, so he only needed to look at the clues to the potion's materials. So it's in Hornachus. Seeing the record in the document, George suddenly understood. According to this information, the formula for the Fool's Path potion and the clues to the potion's materials were both located in the Hornachus Mountains. However, it warned that there was extreme danger inside, and it was best to wait until he advanced to the level of a trickster before going. The Hornachus Mountains were the same mountain range where Landless had tricked his parents into building a steel mill. It was one of the important geographical features of the northern continent, located in the central part of the northern continent, mainly distributed at the border of Rune and Indus. This mountain range is not only a natural boundary between the 2 countries, but its source was also once the capital of the First Solomon Empire. Moreover, he had initially heard about the Hornachus from Klein, the source being Antigonus's notes that triggered the initial series of events. However, at that time, his main focus was on converting magic and spiritual energy, and he hadn't paid much attention. Unexpectedly, the Hornachus Mountains actually concealed the formula for high-sequence potions following the Fool's Path and clues to related potion ingredients. It seems that the Secret Order's constant search for Antigonus's notes is most likely for clues related to the Fool's Path. By the way, I can ask Rosal. Rosal is very familiar with the history of the 4th century and was once the Emperor of Indus. He must have some knowledge of the Honacus Mountains. With a flash, George entered the Source Castle. Inside the Source Castle, Rosal was currently fighting Klein. Ha, watch my combo. Joe Mingru, you're still no match. I'm not good at playing Oni 8, I'll switch to my Sharinu next time. Klein was clearly unconvinced. It turned out the two were playing a game console that George had conjured using his shape-shifting magic. Rosal was bored alone in the Source Castle, so George conjured a game console for him. Klein had some time after dealing with things in Tingen, and at Rosal's invitation, they started playing together. George is here, let's play a round. Joe Mingru's too bad. Seeing George appear, Rosal proudly issued a battle invitation. George waved his hand. I have something important to ask you. Do you know the Honach Mountains? He briefly recounted the clues about the Fool's Path potion he obtained from the Church of the Night Goddess. Rosal stroked his beard, pondered for a moment, and said, as far as I know, the Honach Mountains seem to have some connection with the Antigonus family. The Antigonus family? George's eyes narrowed. He knew this family. It was once one of Solomon's most powerful families. Antigonus's notebooks came from this family, as did the puppet with the extraordinary characteristics of the master of puppets. So, if he wasn't mistaken, this family once possessed the potion formulas and related potions for the Fool's Sequence pathway. The head of the Antigonus family seems to be a Sequence, one mysterious servant of the Fool's Sequence, possessing the Fool's Sequence pathway. When I advanced to demigod status, I helped that old man Zara to steal a notebook from the Antigonus family. After obtaining the notebook, Zarato went to the Honachus Mountains. He was a Sequence 2 miracle master. However, I never saw him again until my death. Therefore, the Honachus Mountains most likely contain high sequence extraordinary characteristics of the Fool's Sequence left behind by the Antigonus family. And it certainly also holds immense danger. The Church of the Night Goddess didn't lie to you. For a Sequence 2 miracle master like Zarato to perish, the Honachus Mountains must at least harbor Sequence 1 level danger. However, since George could contend with the fallen Mother Goddess, it shouldn't be a major problem. Hopefully, we can collect all the remaining potion ingredients at once. That would save us trouble. George nodded. For him now, unless the original creator resurrected, there was no danger. He only cared about how many useful potion ingredients or extraordinary characteristics the Honachus Mountains held. Leaving Source Castle, he didn't waste any time and flew directly to the Honach Mountains. If he could get the potion ingredients and prepare all the potions early, the rest would be easier. It shouldn't take him much time anyway. He aimed to get back before dawn and then plan his advancement to Trickster. Chapter 790 The Harvest of the Misty Town. This power, it looks like the power of the Goddess of Darkness. In just a few seconds, George had traveled from Backland to the Honachus Mountains on the border of the Kingdom of Rune. As he scanned the entire mountain range with his mental energy, a strange expression appeared on his face. At the peak of the mountain range, there was clearly a hidden seal, and the power emanating from the seal was the same as the power of the Goddess of Darkness. Could it be that Antigonus, who disappeared back then, and Zarathustra, who disappeared later, were both related to the Goddess of Night? According to Rosal, Zarathustra was the former leader of the Secret Order, and the Church of the Goddess of Night possessed most of the potion recipes and ingredients for the Fool's Path, and also controlled almost all the mermaids in the inland areas. If it wasn't intentional, it really didn't make sense. Let's go in and take a look first. The seal on the Honachus Peak was mainly inward-facing, not particularly strong outward-facing. In his rough assessment, anyone with demigod-level power could break in from the outside. But to get out, unless there was a special method, it would probably require at least Sequence 1 power to force their way out. Appearing beside the seal atop the peak, George slashed his hand, creating a dark crack, and stepped inside. Upon entering the seal, he was no longer greeted by snow-capped mountains, but by a small town shrouded in mist. The town was small, but strangely eerie, especially the ancient-looking, pointed-roof church in its center. Eye of Insight, with a wave of his hand, a massive eye appeared above the town, taking in everything within. The power of the Night Path and the Fool Path are locked in a struggle, along with a whole town of puppets. It seems this time we'll not only gain Sequence 3 and Sequence 2 extraordinary companions, but possibly even Sequence 1 and Sequence 0. The Fool Path's power level in the town is close to that of a true god, indicating that a unique fool might exist within the town. Let's go into the church and take a look. Landing in the town, George headed directly towards the church. He felt that what he was looking for was inside. Upon seeing George, a living person, the townspeople all stopped in their tracks and turned to look at him with strange expressions. George paid no attention to this. Roar! Seeing George walk towards the church, the townspeople roared like wild beasts and attacked him like monsters. Sever! George snorted lightly, and all the townspeople immediately stopped and fell to the ground. The townspeople were actually lifeless puppets, controlled by the spiritual threads extending from the church. He had just severed the spiritual threads of all the puppets, freeing the townspeople. As the spiritual threads of the townspeople disappeared, the fog in the town dissipated considerably, causing the red moon in the sky to suddenly brighten a bit. At this moment, night suddenly fell, and a mysterious and powerful force enveloped George, trying to drag him into the darkness and seal him away. It was because he had just weakened the power in the town's fog that the sealing power was strengthened. This power is not enough to seal me. George's body emitted a strong light, directly dispelling all the darkness that enveloped him. Previously, he would have had a hard time dealing with the sealing power of a god without using his own strength. But now, having devoured the child of chaos, his spiritual power was no less than that of an ordinary true god. Combined with the magic from his previous life, he could easily handle it. Crucially, he had a deep understanding of sealing magic. In fact, he was more skilled at sealing than the goddess of night. Pushing open the church door, he saw a series of humans suspended in the hall by threads of spirit energy. Some wore black classical robes, some brown jackets, some wore oversized skirts, and some were dressed in tattered clothes, resembling beggars. Among them were several demigods of sequence 4, and from different sequences at that. If an ordinary demigod saw this bizarre scene, they would probably be terrified, but George's eyes lit up. I didn't expect it to be so fast. The puppets hanging in the hall were all of considerable strength, the lowest being sequence 6. Whether used as his own puppets or for researching their extraordinary characteristics, they were all excellent. But that's not the point. The point is that the most powerful marionette here is actually sequence 3, and a sequence 3 ancient scholar within the diviner sequence. Therefore, by collecting these marionettes, he gained the extraordinary characteristics of sequence 3, and with the extraordinary characteristics of sequence 2 obtained from shattering the magic lamp, he now only needs the extraordinary characteristics of sequence 1 and the uniqueness of sequence 0 to advance to the Fool. He also saw a clue to the extraordinary characteristics of sequence 1. It was the old man behind the statue in the church hall, the only one not transformed into marionette by the spirit threads. It doesn't seem to be the original body, but it possesses a small portion of the extraordinary characteristics of sequence 1. Could this be Zarathustra's historical poor image? George stepped forward to examine the old man, confirming his identity based on the appearance of Zarathustra provided by Rosal. He guessed that Zarathustra must have obtained the sequence 1 potion recipe and extraordinary characteristics in this misty town. However, he must have encountered some danger and couldn't escape. Of course, the specifics would only be clear through searching Zarathustra's memories. Finally, another diviner has arrived. Zaratu slowly opened his eyes, looked George up and down, his voice slurred and weak. Do you want to escape from here? I can help you. Looks like you think I'm a heretic imprisoned here by the goddess of night. George's lips curled into a smile. No, I just want to borrow your head. Extending his right hand, he was too lazy to play mind games with Zaratu and directly began searching his soul. Since this historical image of Zaratu possessed intelligence, it must have been endowed with a part of Zaratu's own soul. Therefore, he could obtain all of its memories through soul searching. A mere sequence 5 dares to be so insolent before me. Zaratu was stunned when he saw George directly attack, then his weak expression vanished, replaced by anger. Normally, someone exiled to a small town would be extremely cautious after experiencing the terror outside and the eeriness of the church inside. He could use this to trick the other party into doing things for him, so that he could merge with his original body, complete his advancement, and escape from here. This was the first time he had encountered such a reckless person. Entering the church without any regard for consequences, he actually attacked him, the only survivor. If it were a higher sequence opponent, it wouldn't be so bad, but as someone of the same sequence, he could clearly tell that the other party was merely a sequence 5 mystic puppet master. Chapter 791 and Banyu out of control. Then you can hang up there with those disobedient little brats. Zeratul extended a thread of spirit energy from his body, swiftly shooting towards George. As a Sequence 1 historical image of a semi-advanced mystic servant, although currently suppressed by the power of the goddess of night and unable to leave the church, controlling a mere Sequence 5 was still effortless. If it weren't for the fact that the puppet under his control couldn't leave the church, he would have already used it to retrieve the obsidian outside the church to break the seal. What? The instant his spirit energy touched George, his thread of spirit energy was instantly shattered into nothingness by a powerful force. It was as if he hadn't extended a thread of spirit energy at all. While he was still in shock and hadn't reacted, George's hand was already about to press down on his head. Flame Leap. Zeratul used his Flame Leap ability, trying to dodge the attack. However, his Flame Leap failed. The space around him had been sealed by a powerful force he had never encountered before. Looking up at George again, for some reason, George, who had previously appeared as just a Sequence 5 in his eyes, had instantly transformed into a towering giant. The hand that descended upon his head seemed to cover the entire world. He was like an ant, powerless and unable to resist. You are the true God, correct, but no reward? George's lips curled slightly. He sealed Zarathustra's historical image, extracted a fragment of its soul, and began searching through all of Zarathustra's memories. Zarathustra, perhaps little Zarathustra would be more fitting. A moment later, he led little Zarathustra's fragmented soul to a wall at the very back of the church. From little Zarathustra's memories, he knew that this wall contained the hidden seal of the Dark Goddess. Behind the seal lay little Zarathustra's true form, an Antigonus, the ancestor of the Antigonus family. It turned out that Antigonus was the son of the destroyer wolf Phrygia, a born mythical creature, a miracle worker from birth. He witnessed the destroyer wolf's fall at the end of the first flame, and through this connection, gained the fool's uniqueness and a mysterious servant trait. Afterwards, he and his sister, the Heavenly Mother, fled the kingdom inhabited by the Wolf clan, hiding everywhere. Finally, they crossed the sea and arrived at the northern continent, establishing a hidden kingdom, the Kingdom of Night, in the uninhabited Harnicus Mountains. In the Fourth Age, they ascended to the rank of mystic servant, transforming into human form and serving the Solomon Empire. Later, with the help of Adam and Amun, they barely managed to accept the uniqueness of the Fool, advancing to the rank of half-fool. During the reign of the four emperors, they killed Zeratul, taking his mystic servant extraordinary characteristics. Hunted by the goddess of night, and with the consciousness of the celestial beginning to awaken within their bodies, they ultimately lost control and went mad, transforming into a mythical creature and being sealed by the goddess of night in a hidden palace on the summit of Harnicus. The Zeratul who made the deal with Rosal was the son of the deceased Zeratul. He had been searching for the vanished Antigonus in order to reclaim his father's extraordinary characteristics. Through Rosal, he obtained Antigonus's notes, learning that Antigonus was sealed on the summit of Harnicus. As a precaution, his true form remained at the headquarters of the secret order, while a fragment of historical footage traveled to the summit of Harnicus in his place. Finally, he did find the out-of-control Antigonus and his father Zarathustra's extraordinary trait as a mystic servant. Unfortunately, just as he advanced, the prepared goddess of darkness sealed his historical image in the town's church. Because his soul was incomplete, although young Zarathustra advanced to Sequence 1 mystic servant, he lost control and fell into madness. The historical image of young Zarathustra in the church had just been meant to lure George outside to retrieve the obsidian that could break the seal, allowing him to escape and reunite with his true form. This would restore his sanity and make him a true Sequence 1 mystic servant. Over the years, many extraordinary members of the secret order had been searching for anything related to Antigonus, hoping to find a way to save their leader, young Zarathustra. Unfortunately, they kept pouring into Mount Harnicus, only to become puppets of the town or be swallowed by the darkness. George strongly suspected that this was a trap set by the goddess of night, designed to lure the secret order's experts to their deaths. It's understandable, really. The Fool, Error, and Gate pathways are the easiest ways to awaken and resurrect a celestial. The goddess of night, as the first soul released from the Source Castle, definitely needs to be suppressed. Confining the mermaid greatly limits the birth of the puppet master, while the seal on Mount Harnicus constantly lures puppet masters and those above them to their deaths. Looking at it this way, I can get all the extraordinary traits for advancing to the Fool pathway soon, without taking the obsidian. George directly waved his hand, breaking the hidden seal on the back wall of the church, and then inscribed the symbol leading to the hidden hall. He had the extraordinary traits for Sequence 3, from a Sequence 3 puppet on the church. He had the extraordinary traits for Sequence 2, from the broken magic lamp. Advancing to the complete Sequence 0 Fool requires the Fool's uniqueness in 3 Sequence 1 Mysterious Servant extraordinary traits. Mbanu's body possesses the Fool's uniqueness in 1 Sequence 1 Mysterious Servant extraordinary trait. Little Zaratu's body possesses 1 Mysterious Servant extraordinary trait. In other words, he only needs to find the last Mysterious Servant extraordinary trait to advance to Sequence 0 Fool. As for rituals, he had ways to quickly handle those advancement rituals. I'm not a woman. George had just opened the door to the hidden palace through the symbol and stepped inside when he was met with a terrifying attack. Countless thick, slippery spiritual threads, like tentacles, coiled around him. Compared to the previous Little Zaratu, they were on a completely different level. Tricolor flame. George opened his mouth, and a powerful tricolor flame erupted, instantly burning all the tentacles to nothingness. When the flames dissipated, a huge palace appeared before him. The palace was covered with densely packed marionettes, more than 10 times more than the cathedral. That's insane, George exclaimed. Hanging marionettes above the palace for admiring was purely Mbanu's personal hobby. Not every high-sequence powerhouse in the Fool sequence liked to do that. Directly in front of the palace was a huge, ancient stone throne, inlaid with dull gold and gems. Above the stone throne were countless transparent, writhing spiritual worms, the mythical form of the out-of-control Mbanu. At the bottom of the chair lay a blasphemous card, the Fool, crafted by Roselle. Clearly, it was placed there by the goddess of night as a bait. However, he no longer needed it, as the creators of all the blasphemous cards were now within his source castle. But he still needed to deal with Mbanu. He required Mbanu's unique Fool's nature and the extraordinary characteristics of the mysterious servant. Chapter 792 The Celestial Venerable appears. It seems the church's clues were indeed accurate. This place truly contains all the necessary potion recipes and materials for the Fool's path. George looked at Mbanu on the stone chair in front of him and pondered, however, since this was all part of the Night Goddess's scheme, why did she let me in here? Was it a test, or does she intend to use Mbanu and Zaratu to eliminate me, or use me to eliminate Mbanu and Little Zaratu? If the Night Goddess disagreed, the church wouldn't have told him about the subsequent potions and extraordinary traits for the Fool's path. Therefore, he believed the Night Goddess was definitely watching everything happening here and had her own agenda. But he didn't care too much. Whatever the Night Goddess's purpose was, it didn't matter to him, whether it was a test or a ploy. As long as he got what he wanted, it was a win-win situation. A mythical creature surpassing Sequence 1, closest to Sequence 0 True God level. Let me test your mettle. Although Antigonus lacked 2 parts of the mysterious servant trait and hadn't fully become a Sequence 0 Fool, his strength was inferior to that of a true god. However, because he had lost control and entered a mythical state, coupled with the presence of the resurrected consciousness of the celestial venerable within him, his true power, unleashed at full strength, was only slightly lower than that of a true god. This served as a benchmark, giving him a sense of proportion. Previously, his assessment of a true god's strength was primarily based on the amount of spiritual energy, which wasn't accurate. Furthermore, the fallen mother goddess he had fought had most of her power blocked by the initial barrier. Finally, this was also a chance to experience firsthand the power of the highest sequence of the Fool's path. Giant's Fist. George's body rapidly expanded into a giant, slamming his fist fiercely towards Antigonus, who sat on the stone throne. Having learned about the high-sequence individuals of the Fool's path from Roselle, he knew very well that the Fool was one of the least adept at close combat among the 22 pathways. Therefore, he intended to use a powerful close combat attack as a probe for his first strike. Sensing the enormous fist from above that could envelop his entire body, Antigonus, who was previously in a sealed state, immediately reacted instinctively. Why didn't the goddess of night kill Antigonus, but instead chose to seal him away? Because she couldn't. The out-of-control Antigonus was only slightly weaker than a true god. If the goddess of night wanted to completely kill him, she would suffer a severe backlash. She could only seal him in this hidden hall by claiming he was out of control while fighting the awakening consciousness of the celestial being within him. But the prerequisite was not to provoke him. Once provoked, you would face his most ferocious counterattack. Just as George's fist was about to strike Antigonus's head, it suddenly disappeared, returning to the position where he had first thrown the punch. Fooling time, George raised an eyebrow. He knew Antigonus had manipulated time, causing his punch to rewind to the beginning. At the same time, slippery, evil tentacles appeared from all directions, swarming towards George. Compared to the initial tentacles, the number had increased 1,000-fold, and the power of each tentacle had been greatly enhanced. Super magic, fairy sphere. George waved his hand, and the power of time rapidly expanded, enveloping the entire hall. Antigonus and the tentacles were all frozen in place. You fool time, but I controlled time. Time was frozen throughout the entire hall, except for George's own fist, which remained unaffected and struck directly at Antigonus's head. Boom, the earth cracked, and the hidden power enveloping the entire main peak almost collapsed. The stone chair shattered, and Antigonus's figure vanished, leaving only a smashed spirit surge. Clearly, Antigonus had used his stand ability at the crucial moment, replacing himself with a spirit surge. Fooling, activating the fooling ability and breaking the time restriction, his body writhed continuously, and a star suddenly appeared above George, hurtling towards him. Is this reconstruction? George narrowed his eyes and actually leaped up, delivering a chop to the air, instantly splitting the planet in two. Reconstruction is one of the abilities that awakens when one becomes a Sequence 1 mysterious servant. It is also called alteration or grafting. This ability can recombine many entities or abstract concepts that are not directly related under normal circumstances, achieving incredible effects, as if altering definitions, logic, directions, or rules. It acts directly on the concept itself, not only at a very high level, like a true deity descending, but also with a mysterious and enigmatic effect, embodying the authority of the realm of change. Antigonus, being the fool in an incomplete state, only grafted the concept of a planet. In his complete state, he could graft a star and directly smash it at the opponent. It doesn't mean he actually moved a star from outside Earth, he merely grafted the concept of a star. However, the power is actually no less than directly using a star as a projectile. Therefore, the Sequence 0 true god of the Fool's Path may not have a particularly strong physical body, but in actual combat, his explosive power is considerable. A series of stars used as projectiles would make even the eternal sun think twice. It's about time to end this. After his physical body shattered the planet, George didn't continue testing it. Instead, he returned to his normal size and directly unleashed a true god-level attack. Super magic, fairy law. A massive magic circle appeared above the entire main peak, and terrifying light-based magical energy instantly filled the entire hidden realm. Fairy law targets enemies identified by George, so anyone within its range cannot evade it, no matter what method is used. And coincidentally, Antigonus, affected by the seal of the goddess of night, was unable to leave the mountain. He could only take the full force of George's god-level magical attack. After the white light faded, only a few hundred of the mythical creatures, originally composed of countless worm-like forms, remained, barely clinging to life. Clearly, Antigonus, having taken the full force of this attack, was now at his last gasp. It's good he's not dead. I can use soul-searching to see if I can get some replenishment. George stepped forward, intending to recover the fool's uniqueness and the extraordinary characteristics of the mysterious servant, and also to examine Antigonus's memories. However, he had only taken one step when he suddenly stopped. Interesting, suddenly, Antigonus transformed from his mythical worm form into a young man in the blink of an eye. This young man's eyes showed no trace of the madness caused by losing control. Instead, they exuded boundless majesty and an indescribable eeriness. Antigonus, no, it seems to be the heavenly venerable of blessing and prosperity. Chapter 793 Celestial Venerable, this world has changed. Antigonus's madness and loss of control were mainly due to the awakening of the Celestial's consciousness, forcing him to focus all his energy on resisting the possession of his body, thus losing control of its extraordinary characteristics. The goddess of night, taking advantage of the moment when the two were evenly matched, sealed them both away. This prevented Antigonus from rampaging and slaughtering indiscriminately, and also prevented the Celestial from ultimately winning and gaining control of the body. George's attack, while severely injuring Antigonus, also weakened the goddess of night's seal. The Celestial took the opportunity to suppress Antigonus's consciousness and temporarily seize control of the body. Very well, compared to Antigonus, I want to acquire all your knowledge. George did not back down because the Celestial had taken over Antigonus's body. Instead, a look of delight appeared on his face. What memories Antigonus possessed were at most some historical knowledge and experience from advancing through the Fool's sequence. These weren't particularly important to him. Having them was better, not having them wasn't a big problem. After all, he had already acquired all the relevant knowledge of the Fool's Path from Roselle. But the Celestial was different. He could be considered one of the most powerful personalities split from the original creator. His memories not only contained the complete experience of advancing through the Fool's Path, but also all the experience of the Gate Path and the Error Path. They also included how to fuse the 3 adjacent paths, how to advance to the Ancients, how to become a pillar, and the lost source matter, etc. Therefore, in terms of value, the Celestial's memories were far superior to Antigonus's. The key was that Antigonus was severely injured at this moment, and even the Celestial would find it difficult to unleash much power through Antigonus. The Source Castle is in your hands. I didn't expect it wouldn't be resurrected in your body, but it doesn't matter, it just takes a little more effort. The Celestial glanced at George with his emotionless eyes, completely disregarding him. Even though he had sensed that George possessed energy far stronger than that of a typical true god, approaching that of the Ancients. He casually grabbed towards George, and a gate of light, tinged with a bluish-black, appeared above him. The portal was filled with endless grayish-white mist, through which countless orbs of light could be faintly seen. Each orb was essentially a cluster of twisted worms huddled together. Some of these worms were transparent, others translucent, bearing symbols and patterns that were either complex and ineffable or profoundly symbolic. Indeed, this portal was the manifestation of the Source Castle. As long as he could reclaim the Source Castle, even if the resurrected being was only half a fool, he could immediately regain the power of the Ancients. And at that time, if he wished, he could reclaim all the extraordinary characteristics and uniqueness of the 3 pathways, the portal, the error, and the fool. Even if those pathways had given birth to true gods, he could forcefully strip them of the extraordinary characteristics and uniqueness that fused with those true gods. Because he was originally one of the original creator's personalities, the creator of this world, a born ancient. Even if he were resurrected into Sequence 9, or even into an ordinary person, he could instantly reclaim the Source Castle, aggregating the 3 extraordinary characteristics and uniqueness that symbolized him. Of course, under normal circumstances, one must reach Sequence 0 in any of the 3 major pathways, or be at least half a fool like Antigonus, for him to revive. Unless one is the owner of the Source Castle, in which case reaching Sequence 1 is enough for him to revive within its body. Possessing the Source Castle, aggregating the extraordinary characteristics and uniqueness of the 3 major pathways, he is the pillar of this world. He is the Lord of Mysteries, the King of Time and Space, the Beacon of Destiny, the incarnation of the Source Castle, and the ruler of the Spirit Realm. Only God, one of the original creators, can contend with him. After the Celestial Venerable raised his hand and materialized George's Source Castle, the darkness above Mount Tonicus instantly intensified. Celestial Venerable, this world has changed. It now belongs to me, not to you. Seeing the portal moving towards the Celestial Venerable, George remained calm, forming hand seals, and various talismans immediately appeared on the portal. The portal had already been refined by him using the method of refining innate spiritual treasures in the primordial world, and many seals had been made on it. Even if the Celestial Venerable was created from the Source Castle, he couldn't possibly take it back from him at this moment. If the Source Castle is considered a powerful spiritual treasure, then the Celestial Venerable can be seen as a spirit born from that treasure. Under normal circumstances, a spirit has absolute control over a spiritual treasure, but in the primordial world, there are many ways to isolate a spirit from controlling a spiritual treasure. Even directly refining a spirit and creating a new one isn't particularly difficult. How could this be? Seeing the portal, under the influence of George's power, actually freeze in midair and stop moving towards him, the Celestial Venerable's face showed surprise. This was the first time he had encountered such a situation. It seems that during my many years of slumber, the world has undergone some new changes. Even God couldn't seal his natal Source Castle, preventing him from retrieving it. This meant that after his mutual destruction with God, the world had undergone unexpected changes, and some power systems beyond his comprehension had emerged. Like this young man before him, who, despite having only the power level of the Fool's Path Sequence 5, contained power surpassing that of a true god. He even knew strange techniques capable of sealing the Source Castle. However, since you've chosen my branch of power, the outcome was already decided. Although he hadn't managed to reclaim the Source Castle, there was no panic in the Celestial Venerable's eyes. If the opponent were a solar or tyrant pathway, it would be more troublesome. But since the opponent was a full pathway, one of his natal pathways, it was simple. What truly troubled him was the other person who maintained the hidden seal, spying on this place from the shadows. The dark path wasn't a pathway he could control, and he had only gained the upper hands in the struggle for the body, not completely eradicated its consciousness. Once the sequence 0 of the dark sequence hidden in the shadows made a full force attack, he would still be sealed and forced into a state of equal strength with the consciousness of this body. Therefore, he now needed to manipulate the extraordinary characteristics of the full pathway within George's body to go out of control and become a monster, thereby indirectly controlling George. On one hand, he could quickly reclaim the Source Castle. On the other hand, he could control George to obstruct the Sequence Zero's intervention. Although George is only Sequence 5, the spiritual energy within him is no less than that of a true god, and there is also another, even more powerful force present. This should be able to help him delay the Sequence 0 of the dark path. It won't be long, just a second, before he can regain control of the Source Castle, become an old one, and then quickly reclaim all his uniqueness and extraordinary traits to become a pillar. Chapter 794 The Goddess of Night descends. Seal, sensing that all the extraordinary characteristics belonging to the fool's path within him were suddenly out of control and began to erode and corrupt his body, George sneered and directly used a sealing technique to seal all the extraordinary characteristics of the fool's path within him. Corrupting his body wouldn't be so easy. If he had already become a fool, and was suddenly betrayed by all the extraordinary characteristics within him, it would be truly dangerous. He might have to completely abandon his physical body and all extraordinary characteristics to escape. But now, the extraordinary characteristics within his body were only at Sequence 5. Even if they were all controlled by the Celestial Venerable, they wouldn't be able to contend with his physical magic power. He could even use his super powerful sealing technique, developed by combining so many worlds, to directly seal all the extraordinary characteristics of the Sequence 5 Puppet Master. In any case, even without all the abilities of the Fool's Path, his strength wouldn't decrease significantly. Now it's my turn. Sealing the extraordinary characteristics of the Puppet Master, George concentrated the spiritual energy within his body and began to cast a counterattack. The Celestial Venerable could manipulate and turn the extraordinary characteristics belonging to the Fool within him against him, but he couldn't control the spiritual energy within him. Because only a small portion of this spiritual energy came from the Puppet Master, the majority was derived from devouring and absorbing the genie and converting it using his magic. Therefore, even without revealing the magic within his body, he could still cast spells using the vast spiritual energy within him. Super Magic, Fairy Radiance Plus, 9 magic circles appeared in succession above the Celestial Venerable, followed by a merciless light filled with endless killing intent crashing down. In terms of pure attack power and destructive force, Fairy Radiance was even superior to Fairy Law. A star, the Celestial Venerable's expression finally changed, and he quickly manipulated his body to activate his grafting ability. With his status, even though Antigonus's body was severely injured and lacked the extraordinary characteristics of 2 mysterious attendants, he could still unleash the power of a true god. Therefore, while Antigonus, who was standing at his peak before, could only graft ordinary planets, the Celestial Venerable could now graft a blazing star. As expected of the Celestial Venerable, if you were at his peak, even if I went all out, I probably wouldn't be a match for him. Seeing an entire star bearing down on him, George couldn't help but sigh. Luckily, you're not at your peak. He wasn't exactly a saint, nor did he possess particularly noble virtues. He wouldn't wait for his opponent to recover before engaging in a fight, nor would he pursue fairness and justice. His approach to enemies was always to strike while they were weak. Sword of Excalibur, a holy sword materialized in his right hand. George infused it with a massive amount of spiritual energy, and then unleashed a powerful strike. The enormous blade of light slammed into the star, shattering it into a pile of ethereal fragments that vanished into thin air. Before the Celestial Venerable could react and continue his attack, George pressed his hands to the ground, and the 5 elemental bodies of metal, wood, water, fire, and earth slowly materialized. 5 elements Kabbalah sealing array, powerful sealing energy gathered around the Celestial Venerable, whose eyes immediately went blank. At that moment, George flashed to his side and began searching his soul. Disappeared so quickly, seemingly sensing George's probing, the Celestial's consciousness didn't continue its entanglement with Antigonus, but instead quickly dissipated. However, George was also swift, intercepting relevant information before it vanished. This information was what he cared about most, how to accommodate the other two pathways after advancing to the Fool, thus advancing to the Ancients and Pillars. It's just so coincidental, what I searched wasn't related historical memories, but memories of advancing to the Ancients and Pillars. It looks like a trap. The Celestial's retreat was actually quite composed. If he wanted, he could have left no trace on Antigonus, preventing him from obtaining any information. But the Celestial deliberately delayed, allowing George to search his soul for the necessary information. Thinking it over, George had a rough idea. In that situation, not only was he present, but also the Dark Goddess secretly watching. Without obtaining the Source Castle and severely injured, escape was practically impossible. That's why the Celestial was so easily sealed away, and then completely abandoned the idea of resurrecting on Antigonus. But how could the cunning Celestial Venerable, who could deceive even the Son of Chaos to the point of losing his pants, give up so easily? The Celestial Venerable deliberately left behind methods regarding the containment of the gate and the erroneous path, methods regarding advancement to the Ancients and the Pillars. He hoped the Celestial Venerable could advance as quickly as possible. Because the more he advanced, the more extraordinary characteristics of the three paths he contained, the easier it would be for the Celestial Venerable to awaken within him. Frankly, this was a calculated move. Even if he knew this now, he wouldn't give up so easily. Not just him, but all the true gods and angels, who didn't know the Celestial Venerable, who didn't know God. As long as they continued to progress, either the Celestial Venerable or God would awaken, but even knowing this, no one would give up the opportunity for power. What they needed to do was accumulate followers, set anchors for themselves, and maintain sufficient rationality to suppress the Celestial Venerable's awakening. In comparison, he, the outsider, was even less afraid. Because he had plenty of means to suppress the Celestial Venerable's consciousness that would awaken within him in the future. First, he had the means to fuse his spirit with his clones, greatly increasing his soul power, which could easily suppress the Celestial Venerable's will within his extraordinary characteristics. Secondly, his other avatars weren't idle either, diligently devouring and digesting the world, their strength increasing exponentially every day. By then, he might have already advanced to the multiverse level, and wouldn't have to worry about the Celestial Venerable's will awakening. Thirdly, and finally, he had his own created world. If the Celestial Venerable's consciousness revived, he could immediately enter his own world. Using the laws of his own world, he could forcibly extract the Celestial Venerable's will from all extraordinary characteristics, thus fundamentally disintegrating it. Let's extract the extraordinary characteristics and uniqueness first. After activating his ability and forcibly removing the Fool's uniqueness and the mysterious servant's extraordinary characteristics from the critically injured and dying Antigonus, George was about to continue extracting the characteristics from Sequence 2 to Lesser Sequence 9 when a figure stopped him. Could you, for my sake, leave him with the extraordinary characteristics from Sequence 2 to Sequence 9? George looked up and saw a beautiful young woman with an expressionless face and dark, deep eyes appear before him. If it's for the sake of the Goddess of Night, then I'll definitely give in. After all, you're the one who provided the clues. He already possesses the extraordinary traits of Sequence 2, Sequence 3, and the potion of Sequence 4. Therefore, the extraordinary traits of Sequence 2 Miracle Worker to Sequence 9 Diviner within Antigonus are no longer important to him. What's important is figuring out whether this Goddess of Night, who has appeared in the body of a deceased hidden angel, is friend or foe. Chapter 795 The Goddess's Scheme. I apologize for my previous probing. The Goddess of Night sensed the hidden meaning in George's words but didn't try to hide it or make excuses. This time, she had the church provide George with clues about the formula and materials for a high-sequence potion through the Fool's Path, her aim being to lure him to Mount Hornichus and have him meet Antigonus. She did this because she had always suspected George might be a resurrected Celestial. Why? First, George wasn't a soul from the Source Castle, yet he knew about modern events and was quite knowledgeable about them. If George were a Celestial, this would explain it. Second, George possessed a physical body stronger than mythical creatures, yet his essence was human. This was illogical. If George were a Celestial, a being born of the past with a powerful body, that would be plausible. Third, George possessed special magic outside the normal sequence, and its power was astonishing. Besides Celestials and beings of God's caliber, who else could wield abilities outside the normal sequence? Even she couldn't do it now. Finally, and most importantly, that is, George chose the Fool's Path, one of the three most fundamental paths of the celestial venerable. Therefore, after observing him, she felt that George might be a resurrected celestial venerable, only appearing in this form due to some unexpected events. To verify this, she lured George to Hornicus, to the place where Antigonus was sealed and covered by her hidden power. If George were truly a celestial venerable, he would definitely resonate with the celestial venerable consciousness within Antigonus's body. At that time, she would use all her strength to eliminate George. However, the facts have proven that George is clearly not a celestial venerable, and his strength is completely beyond her expectations. Being able to force back the celestial venerable consciousness, George's strength is already comparable to any true god. The key is that he is currently only a Sequence 5 mystic puppet master. If he really becomes a fool, his power is estimated to be able to contend with a true god of 2 sequences. That's why she took the initiative to apologize, wanting to ease the tension with George and see if she could win him over to her side. It's alright, I'm not a petty person, and I've gained quite a bit from this trip. George waved his hand, genuinely unconcerned and understanding of the night goddess's probing. Crucially, he also wanted to cooperate with her. Since both were inclined to cooperate, their words naturally fell into place, and after a few exchanges, both sides understood each other's intentions. Why would you agree to the royal family having another Black Emperor? Having confirmed the night goddess's goodwill, George's eyes darted around as he began to probe. Although he had suspected something before, he still wanted to confirm it with the night goddess. If there were no special reasons, he could conveniently seek her cooperation to resurrect Roselle. The night goddess possessed the authority of secrecy, and with her help, they could minimize the chances of being discovered by the Eternal Sun and the god of steam and machinery. Because my current situation is special, it's inconvenient for me to act. The night goddess didn't explicitly state it, but she revealed that she didn't particularly want the royal family to have another Black Emperor. George immediately understood, unable to act. Are you absorbing the extraordinary characteristics and uniqueness of death? I've almost finished absorbing it, but I can't show it yet. The goddess of night smiled slightly. I need the other gods to think I'm still digesting the extraordinary characteristics and uniqueness of death, and I'm in a state where I can't act. She is now a dual-path true god. Otherwise she wouldn't dare to lure George here to test whether he is a celestial venerable. This is clearly a trap. George's eyes narrowed, and he immediately had some guesses. Are you planning to deal with the god of war, the darkness, the sleeper, and the twilight giant are 3 adjacent sequences that can be interchanged or merged? This also means that the sequence 0 true god of these 3 sequences will inevitably become enemies. Because only by devouring the other 2 can one advance to become a 3-sequence true god. Darkness represents the goddess of night, the sleeper represents death, who was defeated and fell by the 7 gods in the 4th era. It seems that the extraordinary characteristics and uniqueness were obtained by the goddess of night. Finally, the twilight giant represents the god of war, one of the 7 true gods. The goddess of night and the god of war have always been at odds, each wanting to devour the other's uniqueness and extraordinary characteristics. Therefore, if the goddess of night is plotting anything, it's most likely targeting the god of war, Bardhil, the former son of the giant king. That's right, I need to make Bardhil think I'm in poor condition so he'll dare to initiate a divine war. The goddess of night stated her purpose without any concealment. George raised an eyebrow. As far as I know, the god of war has close ties with the eternal flame, the god of steam and machinery, and is also the son of the Earth Mother. If a divine war breaks out, even with your dual path abilities, it'll probably be difficult to win. Even with the Lord of Storm's help, it's still 2 against 4, and the odds aren't high. As long as the god of war initiates a divine war, then I'm confident. The goddess of night's expression was calm, seemingly already certain of victory. George nodded in agreement. As the first modern soul to emerge from the Source Castle, the goddess of night, having risen to her current position step by step, was certainly not an idiot. Since she had such a plan, she must have made thorough preparations. Aren't you afraid I'll leak all this to you later? Even if you tell Badhal, he won't believe you. He's already half convinced about my situation. If you tell him I'm plotting against him, he'll just think you're one of my people, buying me time to digest the uniqueness of death. The goddess of night shook her head. Besides, I don't think you'd do that, do you? Of course, everyone knows I have the best relationship with the Church of the Goddess of Night. George laughed. I won't waste any more words. We'll cooperate. I'll help you deal with the god of war, and you help me resurrect Roselle. Then you'll have another ally, Roselle. The goddess of night looked puzzled. She didn't know Rosal had a chance to be resurrected. George didn't hide anything and explained Rosal's situation and his plan to resurrect Rosal when the royal family ascended to the position of Black Emperor. The goddess of night nodded without hesitation. Okay, no problem. To her, Rosal was a soul from the modern world, just like her. And it would be easy for him to become an ally. Moreover, preventing the royal family from giving birth to a Black Emperor would also prevent the royal family from slipping out of control. With an additional Black Emperor, we'll have more strength to deal with the apocalypse in the future. This is my plan, the goddess of night said, seeing George's candor. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 796 Assassinating a Demigod. I never imagined the Earth Goddess was actually the progenitor of the vampires, returning to his home in Backland with the extraordinary and unique characteristics of the Fool's Sequence I and Sequence I. George couldn't help but give the Night Goddess a thumbs up. It turned out that back in the Second Age, the Night Goddess had begun her scheme to acquire the extraordinary and unique characteristics of the Twilight Giants. After the true Earth Mother Amabella's fall, she used her hidden authority to help the vampire progenitor Lilith impersonate the Earth Mother. Therefore, the god of war believed the Earth Mother was the giant queen Amabella, a true god who would definitely side with him. But in reality, the Earth Mother was Lilith, the Night Goddess's best friend. In the event of a divine war, the Night Goddess would not only know all of the god of war's secrets, but at a crucial moment, he would suffer the most devastating betrayal. The real situation wouldn't be 2 against 4, but 3 against 3. On one side were the Night Goddess, the Lord of Storms, and the Earth Mother. On the other side were the god of war, the god of steam and machinery, and the eternal sun. Even if the god of knowledge and wisdom sides with the god of war, the goddess of night still has a high chance of winning. This is because the goddess of night is now a dual-path true god of darkness and eternal sleep, normally capable of holding her own against 2 opponents and easily defeating one in a one-on-one fight. Furthermore, the goddess of night possesses the uniqueness and extraordinary characteristics of the moon path, which she will return to Lilith when the divine war begins. At that time, Lilith will possess both the mother and moon paths, also having the strength to fight 2 opponents, and will be a hidden spy. Because the divine war was initiated by the god of war, his death and the goddess of night's recovery of his uniqueness and extraordinary characteristics are undeniable. Now, with his addition, it will be even safer if Rosal is resurrected as the Black Emperor. Even with interference from the primordial witch, the true creator, and Adam, the goddess of night can still secure victory. First, advance to Sequence 4, whether it's the royal family's advancement to Black Emperor or the god of war initiating the divine war, there's still some time to go. Taking advantage of this free time, he should quickly advance to Sequence 0. If given the opportunity, he wouldn't just be killing one true god. Although the goddess of night's target is only the god of war, her goal isn't just to resurrect Rosal. If he could take advantage of the chaos to eliminate the eternal flame, the steam and mechanical voice, Adam, the true creator, the primordial witch, and others, taking away their extraordinary characteristics and uniqueness, that wouldn't be out of the question. He already has the potion for advancing to Sequence 4 via the Fool's Path. The ritual requires killing a Sequence 4 demigod in full view of everyone. Killing a demigod isn't difficult, the key is who to kill. The Witch Church and the Aurora Society were taken away by the Goddess of Night's Church because of their descending vessels, and Lady Despair and Mr. A were also killed by George. Furthermore, the royal family has publicly severed cooperation with the 3 major churches. Therefore, they haven't sent any high sequence powerhouses yet. Only some Sequence 5 and Sequence 6 individuals. This doesn't fit his current advancement ritual, and killing these cult extraordinary beings wouldn't attract many spectators. How about we eliminate one of the royal demigods? George pondered for a moment and had already made up his mind. Since he was now on the opposite side of the ruined royal family, there was no need to be polite. Moreover, openly killing a royal demigod would be more sensational and easier to spread, perfectly fitting the ritual standards. It's you I choose, Selt. With a wave of his hand, George cast a homing spell, transforming into a ball of flame. He first appeared beside the puppet Jason, then brought Jason to the sky above Selt's villa. Selt, a demigod-level powerhouse in the Rune military, was also one of the royal demigods. He was primarily responsible for organizing the human trafficking and collection of people. After the matter was exposed, due to the need to deal with the three major churches, the royal family, citing his lack of knowledge, temporarily suspended him from his position and confined him to his home, but did not impose any further punishment. Therefore, Selt now stayed at home every day, occasionally hosting balls, enjoying life, and quietly waiting for George III to ascend to the Black Emperor before being reinstated. A ball, perfect, that'll bring in even more spectators. Looking down at the brightly lit villa and the extravagant ball inside, George's hands moved swiftly, and soon a strangely shaped sword appeared in his hand. That should be about right. He handed the sword to the puppet Jason. Under his modifications, while the puppet Jason could contend with a Sequence 4, quickly defeating it in front of everyone was still extremely difficult. A Sequence 4 demigod could unleash a mythical creature form when fighting desperately, making it difficult even for a Sequence 3 to subdue in a short time. Therefore, he replicated Gilgamesh's Ea for the puppet Jason. With the Ea, capable of cleaving worlds, the problem wouldn't be so big. In the Queen's district of Backland, an area inhabited by nobles and the ultra-wealthy, inside one of the luxurious villas, Saint Selt, the focus of the ball, was chatting with several new party nobles while holding a wine glass. Suddenly, his brow furrowed, and he pointed upwards. The flames weaken here. Boom. A massive flaming javelin pierced the roof, but upon entering the hall, it was continuously weakened by an invisible force. By the time it reached Selt, it was only the thickness of a finger, and Selt shattered it with a wave of his hand. Who dares to attack this general? With a swift movement, Selt flew directly above the villa, radiating a powerful aura. As a fourth-order law mage of the Judgment Sequence, he could defy the laws of physics, floating in mid-air and releasing his majesty to intimidate enemies. Moreover, as a practitioner of order, he could distinguish between ordinary people and extraordinary beings based on their position. He could even accurately determine the level of an extraordinary being. Sequence 5, the Apostle of Desire. Are you the one who assassinated Duke Negan? Looking at Jason floating in mid-air, Selt immediately recognized him based on his sequence level and appearance. However, his face was filled with confusion. According to his understanding, the Apostle of Desire who assassinated Duke Negan should be on his side. So why would he come to assassinate him? But he quickly ran out of time to think, as his opponent attacked again. After a brief battle, his expression grew increasingly serious. Although his opponent was only Sequence 5, their actual combat strength was in no way inferior to his own. He even felt that he was being suppressed by the opponent. Fortunately, the other extraordinary individuals in the villa reacted at this time and began to use their abilities to support him. Moreover, with such a commotion, the people from the three major churches should arrive soon. Indeed, as he expected, the demigods from the Church of the Goddess of Night, the Church of the Lord of Storms, and the Church of the God of Steam and Machinery quickly appeared not far away. So many spectators, that's about enough. George, controlling the puppet, saw the demigods from the three major churches appear and had Jason draw the Ea sword. Chapter 797 Unexpectedly Terrifying. A blinding light rose over Queens, causing the extraordinary beings from the three major churches who were rushing to the scene to show expressions of horror. Not good. When the light dissipated and they finally arrived at the villa, they only saw the body of the demigod Seth, split in two. His extraordinary abilities and the attacker had vanished. You can take the potion now. At this moment, George, who had been hidden in the shadows, recalled Jason and drank the potion in one gulp. The potion went down his throat and entered his body. The extraordinary ability of the trickster began to take effect, attempting to split his mind and body. Normally, with the power contained in the extraordinary ability of the trickster, it would be impossible to split such a powerful mind and body as George's. However, knowing that this was a necessary step to advance to the level of a trickster, George did not stop it. Instead, he continued to control his mind and body to cooperate. Under the effect of the extraordinary ability of the trickster, George felt his body and mind combine and then split into countless worms. Each worm was him, and each worm could also grow into him. This feeling was somewhat similar to his original soul splitting into different worlds and creating different incarnations. Therefore, he adapted quite well to this split, feeling no particular pain or discomfort. The entire process was remarkably smooth. The reason the ascension ritual of the trickster requires an audience is because the fool's path requires an anchor point earlier than other paths. Other sequence paths only require an anchor point, that is, followers, to stabilize the mental state, upon reaching sequence 0 and becoming a true god. However, the fool's path sequence for trickster, because both spirit and body can differentiate into spirit worm clones, needs to establish an anchor point in advance to stabilize the spirit. The audience in the ritual can be considered as anchor points. Ideally, developing more followers would make the anchor points even more stable. But none of this mattered to George. His spirit was too powerful. Even without anchor points, he wouldn't experience a mental split and lose control. Besides, he already had quite a few followers, providing ample and stable anchor points. These were the impoverished civilians he had saved during the Great Smog. Finally, even without the civilians saved by the Great Smog as anchor points, and without the audience for the ritual, George felt he already possessed an extremely large number of anchor points to stabilize himself. Because his clones held high status in different worlds, they were worshipped by countless people. In the Harry Potter world, for example, he even established a magical empire. As his body differentiated into transparent worms, each worm shimmering with layers of mysterious symbols, George's mind gradually gained new abilities and new occult knowledge. At the same time, he gradually understood the method for digesting the potion. Horror and terror. Is this supposed to scare people? The main method for digesting the trickster's potion was to scare people. The more and stronger the targets, the faster the potion was digested. Alternatively, leaving behind some eerie legends and spreading them widely could also quickly digest the potion. Right, let's scare little Zaratu first. There were 3 extraordinary characteristics of the Sequence 1 Mystic Servant. Mbanyu had one, which he had already taken. Zaratu had one, which was first taken by Mbanyu, then retrieved by little Zaratu, and was now in the body of the insane little Zaratu. He happened to be there to retrieve little Zarathustra's portion, and could also scare little Zarathustra, who was already a Sequence 1, to help him digest the potion. If he could scare a Sequence 1 with a Sequence 4, and succeed, he could probably digest most of the potion. The last clue to the extraordinary characteristics of the mysterious servant had just been given to him by the goddess of night. It was inside a sealed artifact in the Forsaken Land. It turned out that after discovering that neither the goddess of night, Amanesis, nor Wang Tao had chosen the 3 paths of the celestial venerable, the Source Castle had deliberately added a sealed artifact with the extraordinary characteristics of the mysterious servant when releasing the 3rd soul, Zhou Mingru. This way, Zhou Mingru would immediately become a Sequence 1 mysterious servant upon awakening, thus instantly reviving the celestial venerable. Amanesis discovered the celestial venerable's plan and separated Zhou Mingru's soul from the sealed artifact. Zhou Mingru's soul entered the body of the recently deceased Klein, while the sealed artifact fell into the Forsaken Land. Therefore, if George wanted to advance to the Fool's level later, he would still need to go to the Forsaken Land. However, for him, entering the Forsaken Land was not a difficult task. Forget everything, he extracted the wisp of soul from the historical rift image of little Zaratu from his own world, first modifying its memories before releasing it. To be truly frightening, one must catch the enemy off guard. The released soul of little Zaratu instinctively entered the historical rift, flying towards the period of history where little Zaratu's original body resided. George also concealed himself, suppressing aura, and quietly followed. A Sequence 2 miracle master of the Fool's Path can already enter historical rifts and hide in a past period of history. When little Zaratu sent his historical rift image to Mount Hornicus, his original body had been hiding in a historical rift that was difficult to detect. After acquiring the extraordinary characteristics of the mysterious servant, he attempted to advance within the historical rift. However, at the crucial moment of advancement, the goddess of night severed and sealed his historical rift image on Mount Hornicus, resulting in an incomplete soul. Although he ultimately succeeded in advancing, he lost control and became a madman. At this moment, the sealed soul returned, and little Zaratu's sanity finally returned to normal. Damn Amanesis, I'll avenge this sooner or later. Little Zaratu, whose mythical creature form, composed of countless wriggling worms, had returned to human form, stroked his beard, gritted his teeth, and vowed fiercely. If it weren't for the schemes of the goddess of night, how could he have gone mad for so many years? Moreover, based on his understanding over the years, his father's death at the hands of Antigonus was most likely also due to the goddess of night's machinations. And who is that guy? Could it be that while I was mad all these years, A new true god appeared outside. After calming his emotions, his brows furrowed again. According to the memory in his soul that had returned from Mount Hornicus, an extraordinary being named George entered the misty town. His historical rift image even fought with George, but was instantly shattered. Fortunately, George later confronted Antigonus, and he found an opportunity to escape and return to his original body. I wonder who will win in the end, and who will acquire the fool's uniqueness and the extraordinary characteristics of the mysterious servant. If George wins, he'll have to find a way to face George, who might be the true god, later on. After all, to advance to the fool's level, he needs the fool's uniqueness and the extraordinary characteristics of the mysterious servant. If Antigonus wins, he'll have to find a way to go to Mount Hornicus again. Chapter 798 Successive Advancements. Let's go back to the Secret Order headquarters first and find out what's happened outside all these years. Reaching out to part the fog of history, little Zeratul returned to the normal world. The Secret Order was an extraordinary organization he founded, and although he hadn't been there for years, he believed it was still functioning well. He could use his extraordinary organization to quickly understand the changes in the outside world during the years he had gone mad. Ideally, he could find information on that person named George. However, just as he appeared, a figure exuding terrifying pressure suddenly blocked his way. Got you, little Zeratul. This person was none other than George, who was suspected of possessing the strength of a true god. Run. The moment he saw George, little Zeratul, as a servant of the mysterious, immediately triggered a frantic warning. The fool's path is best at divination, and the higher the sequence, the more likely they are to sense danger in advance. A spiritual warning of this level meant that if he dared to fight this George, he would surely die. With his pupils contracting and his heart almost stopping, little Zeratul didn't hesitate and immediately became ethereal again, entering the gap in history once more. That scare really worked. Feeling a quarter of the potion in his body instantly digested, George nodded in satisfaction and then slipped into the rift of history. As a trickster, he couldn't yet enter the rifts of history. But he wasn't just a trickster, he was a creator god infinitely close to the multiverse level, wielding magic from over a dozen worlds. Let alone a mere rift of history, he could enter the entire river of time at will. Especially since the original creator of this world had long since perished, he didn't need to worry about much. Little Zeratul, you can't escape, you can't escape, you can't escape. George deliberately slowed down, maintaining a distance of 1 meter from little Zeratul, and then repeated these terrifying words like a vengeful ghost. Little Zeratul's spiritual warning was about to explode, constantly reminding him that he was on the verge of death and needed to escape. But no matter how he tried to escape, no matter which rift of history he entered, even one known only to himself, the agonizing voice behind him never faded. He couldn't shake it off at all. Even while traversing the gaps in history, he tried to launch an attack, sending countless tentacles to slow it down. It was all ineffective, easily neutralized. Not bad, not bad. This way the potion will be digested quickly. Swallowing the terrifying flames released by little Zeratul, George maintained his distance, discovering that he had already digested 90% of his potion. Continuously startling a sequence one beyonder, especially one of his own sequence, was making his potion digest like a rocket. Normally, a sequence 4 mystic mage would be more likely to be startled than frightened by a sequence 1 mystic servant. Therefore, his method was impossible for ordinary people to replicate. It's about time to end this. After chasing for a while longer, feeling his potion was fully digested, George no longer maintained his distance, but instead used a sealing spell to block little Zeratul's path. You and I are not on the same path. There's no need to kill me. I'm willing to become your angel and help you spread your teachings. Little Zeratul slammed his head against the seal, knowing he had nowhere to escape, and immediately changed his strategy to try and negotiate with George. He felt that as a sequence 1, as an angel, if he was willing to lower himself, even a true god couldn't refuse. After all, a normal true god wouldn't have any sequence 1s of the same sequence under his command. He could only recruit sequence 1s from other paths as his angels, his representatives on Earth. But George was clearly not on the same path as him. Perhaps he was a true god who had recently advanced, and he definitely needed powerful subordinates. Who said we're not on the same path? George's lips curled up, and he proactively released his extraordinary characteristics as a trickster. Little Zeratul's expression immediately turned incredulous. This is impossible. How could you be a sequence 4 trickster? A sequence 4 trickster chasing after him, a sequence 1 mystic attendant, was simply a fantasy. A Grimm's fairy tale. Nothing is impossible. The potion has been digested, and you are of no use anymore. Taking advantage of little Zaratu's shock, George waved his hand and pulled him into his own world. Little Zaratu was, after all, a Sequence 1 mystic servant. If you were to fight outside, it would take some effort to subdue him. The main reason was to avoid attracting the attention of other good and evil gods. But if he was brought into his own world, with the world's enhancement, it would be too easy to deal with him. There was no fear that little Zaratu would use his ability to resurrect in other places. Where is this? Who are you? Once inside his own world, little Zaratu was already under his control, tightly bound by chains manifested from the laws of the world. Looking at the planet below and the boundless universe outside, little Zaratu's face was full of confusion. George was too lazy to explain and directly stepped forward to strip little Zaratu of the extraordinary characteristics of a Sequence 1 mystic servant. He also extracted a whole set of extraordinary characteristics from Sequence 9 to Sequence 2 from his body. The extraordinary traits from Sequence 9 to Sequence 2 belonged to little Zarathustra himself, while the extraordinary trait from Sequence 1 was obtained by little Zarathustra from the Peak of Hornicus. Continue advancing. Now that the Sequence 4 trickster potion had been digested, George didn't delay and directly swallowed a Sequence 3 ancient scholar extraordinary trait. He then landed on the planet he created and began adjusting the time laws of his world. Accelerate. The ritual for advancing to ancient scholar requires detaching oneself from reality for at least 300 years, becoming part of history, and consuming the potion in an era outside the present. If you were in the outside world, he would have to wait 300 years to advance. Therefore, he chose to be in his own world and quickly manipulated the time laws, directly accelerating his world's time by 300 years. In this way, the requirements of the ritual were met. 300 seconds outside, 300 years inside, George successfully advanced from Sequence 4 to Sequence 3 Ancient Scholar, gaining the ability to summon images from the historic void. Zareth Dragneel. Back outside, George began experimenting with the effects of summoning the historic void's influence. As he activated his ability, a dark mage in a black robe appeared before him. Acnologia. The world-destroying black dragon appeared beside the black mage. Iluvatar. After 50 consecutive failures, the creator god of Middle-earth finally appeared beside the world-destroying black dragon. Chapter 799. Life is short, why not give it a try? It seems the stronger the power, the lower the success rate. George dispersed the 3 historical rift images and then reactivated his ability. Fairy Cloud. This time, after failing 10,000 times, he finally summoned the historical rift image of Fairy Cloud. Looking at the image of Fairy Cloud holding the primordial golden cauldron, George almost grinned from ear to ear. Although he had failed 10,000 times to summon the image of Fairy Cloud, and his power was less than 1/10,000th of Fairy Cloud's, he felt that the image of Fairy Cloud holding the primordial golden cauldron should not be weaker than the fallen mother goddess outside Earth. I still need to continue to improve my sequence. Dispersing the 3 historical rift images, George began to think about how to advance to Sequence 2 Miracle Master. Sequence 3 Ancient Scholars can only summon a maximum of 3 historical rift images, while Sequence 2 Miracle Masters can summon 9. The higher the sequence, the more historical rift images can be summoned, the higher the success rate, and the closer the power is to the original body. If you were currently Sequence 0 Fool, with his own powerful strength, he might be able to successfully summon Fairy Cloud in less than 10 tries. If he could acquire the uniqueness and extraordinary traits of the other 2 adjacent sequences, he would likely be able to summon the Cloud Fairy with 100% success. Therefore, he needed to quickly improve his own sequence level. I'm going to the Forsaken Land. George vanished in a burst of flame. He already possessed the extraordinary traits of a Sequence 2 Miracle Master, and 2 of them, one extracted from the magic lamp, and the other from Little Zaratu. However, he still needed to prepare for the ritual to advance to Miracle Master. The ritual involved bringing a lost history back to the present era. The Silver City, where the Tarot Society's son was located, happened to be part of that lost history. As long as he could bring all the people of Silver City away from the Forsaken Land and have them live in the northern continent, the ritual would be complete. This wasn't difficult for George. On the afternoon of October 1st, the 14th Tarot Society meeting took place. Let me introduce the new members: the World, the Black Emperor, and the Hermit. George sat in the Fool's seat, introducing the 3 new members to Audrey and the others. Now that they'd confronted the goddess of night, there was no longer any need for Klein to pretend to be the master of the Source Castle. So George reclaimed the Source Castle and officially became the Fool of the Source Castle. His original identity, Mr. Power, was replaced by the spirit worm that had split off from him. Of the 3 new members, the world was Klein, who no longer needed to play the fool and instead drew a new tarot card. The Black Emperor was none other than Rosal, who was now the Black Emperor, his soul hidden within the Source Castle, quite bored. Upon learning about the Tarot Club, he clamored to join. The final hermit was, of course, Rosal's daughter, the mysterious Queen Bernadette. Because she and George had stopped the Fallen Mother Goddess's plan to control Rosal, they had completed the ritual to advance to Sequence 2. Therefore, Bernadette had now advanced to Sequence 2 Sage, her strength having increased significantly. Audrey and the others were naturally very happy about the growth of the Tarot Club. After bowing to George, they began introducing themselves and sizing up the new members. Audrey, who had already advanced to Sequence 7 Psychiatrist, observed most carefully thanks to her special abilities. She noticed that the 3 new members were remarkably calm, unlike Hugh and Furs who had been flustered when they first joined. The Black Emperor exuded an air of authority, suggesting he must be a person of high status in real life. The world seemed gentle and mild-mannered. The hermit was shrouded in mystery, all was appearing elusive, like looking at flowers through mist or the moon's reflection in water. Respected Mr. Fool, these are the last 5 pages of the diary. Alger materialized the 5 pages of Rosal's diary he had obtained from the Church of the Storm Lord. He had previously acquired many pages of Rosal's diary from the Church of the Storm Lord, but he couldn't memorize them all, so he chose to write them down in batches and materialize them for the Fool. These 5 pages were the final 5, which could be considered repayment to Mr. Fool for the payment he made to Mr. Power for killing Zalingus. Rosal glanced at the diary materialized by Alger, and his lips twitched involuntarily. His diary contained far too many things unsuitable for children, and now it was being shown to his fellow countryman, George, which was truly embarrassing. Especially with his daughter Bernadette sitting right next to him. George waved and took the 5 pages of the diary, glancing at them briefly. Besides records of Rosal's daily affairs, there were also many entries related to witches. One page read, "Recently, Lady Adela introduced me to her distant cousin, equally beautiful and alluring. However, compared to Adela's mature style, this one is clearly more of a young girl. And this cousin has shown me what it means to be light-footed, supple, and easily swayed. I know they are both witches, but life is short, why not give it a try? I also know that their infatuation with me, even lining up to meet me, is because they want to use me to help them digest their potions. But what's it to me?" 6. After reading this diary, George couldn't help but secretly give Rosal a thumbs up. To be honest, he had to admire Rosal in this respect. Most people couldn't do that. Rosal, however, couldn't help but cover his face. Why does the Black Emperor look so embarrassed? It doesn't match his imposing demeanor just now, the hermit snorted, seemingly displeased. Why was she unhappy? The world seemed to be gloating, the 3 of them seemed to know each other in reality. The incredibly observant Audrey quickly noticed the key point. You don't need to collect Rosal's diary anymore." George put away the diary and instructed Audrey and the others. Rosal himself was sitting below, what need did he have for a diary? Besides, through his communication with the Goddess of Night, he had a clear understanding of the history of each era. That's why, having just advanced to Ancient Scholar, his potion was completely consumed. The rule of the Ancient Scholar role was to understand the truth of ancient history as much as possible and uncover hidden secrets. No need for the diary anymore. Audrey and the others were clearly stunned for a moment, but quickly recovered. They assumed the Fool's power had returned significantly. And he had found what he needed in Rosal's diary. But this also meant they lost something relatively easy to trade with Mr. Fool. The diary of Emperor Rosal was widely circulated because no one could understand it, and many copies existed. Collecting it posed no real danger, yet it could be exchanged for valuable magical items and information from the ancient Mr. Fool. Chapter 800 Clues to Adam. Although it was a pity, everyone eventually accepted it, they had no choice. When the free discussion time arrived, Audrey was the first to raise her hand, because I was trying to buy the audience formula at a gathering of extraordinary individuals. 2 people who seem to be members of the Psychological Alchemy Society have recently been contacting me through some nobles. I want to learn more about the Psychological Alchemy Society to decide whether or not to join them. She had originally intended to consult Mr. Fool alone about this. However, considering the presence of powerful figures like Mr. Power in the Tarot Society, and the 3 newly joined members who seemed to have considerable status and strength, she felt that perhaps speaking publicly would yield more useful information. The Psychological Alchemy Society seems to have originated over 200 years ago, originally an enthusiast group formed by mystical enthusiasts who enjoyed exploring the hidden power within the mind. Later, they apparently obtained a treasure map, acquiring a lot of mystical knowledge and potion formulas related to the dreamer's sequence path. I think joining them shouldn't be too dangerous for you, Klein analyzed, based on some information he had obtained from the Church of the Goddess of Night. He was now a Sequence 7 magician, about to be promoted and transferred to Backland, and could see a lot of secret information that shouldn't be available to others. This included detailed information about various organizations. The president of the Psychological Alchemy Society is named Pauline Delaw, and his other identity is Burroughs Hopkins, one of the 4 kings of pirates, known as the King of the Black Sea. It is said that the treasure map found by the members of the Psychological Alchemy Society was a legacy left by Hermes, the great creator of mysticism, Bernadette added. As the Mystic Queen, one of the 4 kings of the sea, how could she not have investigated Burroughs Hopkins, who is also one of the 4 kings? The president of the Psychological Alchemy Society is Burroughs, one of the 4 kings of pirates. Upon hearing this news, apart from Derek the Sun, who knew more about the northern continent, the other veteran members of the Tarot Society showed shock. Especially Alger, an extraordinary member of the Church of the Lord of Storms, who often disguised himself as a pirate to gather intelligence on the high seas. If this information were reported, he would definitely gain a lot of credit. Harris, that old guy's treasure map is probably part of some scheme. He is a veteran of the Twilight Stealth Society. Rosal couldn't help but stroke his chin. He had once been a member of the Twilight Hermits, and frequently interacted with Harris back then, so he naturally knew how cunning and calculating the old man was. He probably used the treasure map to secretly develop an organization as a subordinate of the Twilight Hermits to complete their mission. Harris, the Harris who created the foundations of mysticism in the ancient Harris language, is he still alive? Alger, from the church, showed a shocked expression. Harris was a figure who existed in the Second Era, summarizing and organizing the most basic mystical knowledge, establishing the foundation for the development of mysticism. He even created the ancient Harris language, finally giving humans, who were then treated as slaves and food reserves, the possibility of manipulating spiritual energy and becoming extraordinary beings. What is the Twilight Hermits? Audrey blinked, her face full of confusion, as did Hugh and Furs beside her. As wild extraordinary beings, they had never encountered this knowledge before. It was truly an eye-opening experience. The Twilight Hermits, it's an organization created by Adam. Rosal didn't seem to care, simply introducing the Twilight Hermits situation, and finally instructing, you mustn't utter this organization or Adam's name outside. If you do, he'll sense it. It's only because Mr. Fool is protecting you here that I can tell you. Adam, the imaginary angel of the 8 archangels. Audrey and the others were shocked again. They had previously learned about the legend of Adam from the sun, but it was just a legend. Now, the legend seemed to be becoming reality. The Black Emperor actually knows so much high-level information, and his tone doesn't seem to show any reverence for Hermes and Adam. At the same time, they were also astonished by the Black Emperor's vast knowledge, even knowing such secrets. Furthermore, the Hermit and the world also seemed to know a lot of secret information. The 3 newly joined members might not be as powerful as Mr. Power, but they were likely high-sequence powerhouses. The Mind Alchemy Society is so murky, I think I'll give up. Audrey was hesitant, realizing the Psychological Alchemy Society was involved with a terrifying being like Adam, the Angel King. But George spoke up, join the Mind Alchemy Society. Don't be afraid, I'll protect you. If you can find Adam through the society, you can exchange him for all the potion recipes from Sequence 6 to Sequence 0, the Dreamers, from the Black Emperor. I'll pay the Black Emperor the corresponding reward. Adam was the embodiment of the ancient sun god's divinity, possessing partial access to the profane tablets and the Chaos Sea. Many major events in these eras bear Adam's shadow, including the rise of the lone royal family to the Black Emperor. However, this guy is too good at hiding. Even the 3 true gods, the Lord of Storms, the Eternal Sun, and the God of Knowledge and Wisdom, wanted to kill him, but hadn't found him all these years. Later, When he wanted Roselle to replace George II in Resurrection, Adam would inevitably interfere. If they could find clues to him beforehand and capture him, it would save them a lot of trouble. Moreover, Adam and Amen must be connected. If they could find Amen through Adam, they could obtain the uniqueness and extraordinary characteristics of the wrong path. No problem. If you can meet Mr. Fool's requirements, I can provide all the potion recipes and corresponding knowledge for the Dreamer sequence. Roselle nodded. He knew that George wanted to resolve the uncertainty of Adam in advance so that he could be resurrected smoothly. All the potion recipes and mystical knowledge for the Dreamer sequence, Audrey couldn't help but swallow. My goodness, the temptation was too great, making her immediately abandon her spectator mode. If she could complete the Fool's task, she could obtain all the potion recipes for her subsequent sequence. As long as she could get the corresponding potions, becoming a true god wouldn't be impossible. The more she came into contact with the extraordinary world, the more secrets she learned from the Tarot Society, the more terrifying this world seemed to her. Only by becoming strong enough could she protect her family from harm. Look at the Duke Negan. If a high-sequence powerhouse wanted to kill you, even if you were a duke, you would die. Even if this mission might be very risky, the opportunity was rare, and the Great Fool had promised to protect her. She trusted Mr. Fool. Dear Mr. Fool, I am willing to accept this task. End of this chapter. Thank you so much for reading until the end. Don't forget to give it a like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription or donation encourages us to continue. Thank you all. See you in the next video.